Welcome to the May 18th, 2023 City Council meeting. I am City Council President Jim Nash, and I will be presiding this evening. Before we begin, I want to let everyone know that this meeting and all participating on Zoom will be audio and video recorded. Matters before City Council tonight. We will begin this evening with 3 public hearings concerning the installation of utility poles along our public ways. After that, we will open the floor to public comment. After public comment, we will have 2 important presentations. Mayor Shara will present her budget message for the proposed fiscal year 2024 budget, and council will consider proposed financial orders relative to the budget. Also, the chair of the Elected Officials Compensation Advisory Board, John Bidwell, will present his recommendations to adjust compensation for the mayor, city councilors, school committee, and Smith vocational trustees. Finally, council will be considering how to proceed with recommendations from the select committee to study barriers to serving on city boards and commissions. As always, I want to extend a special thanks to Northampton Open Media for their efforts to make this hybrid meeting possible. I now call the City Council to order. Laura, can you please call the roll?
Certainly. Councillor Elkins.
Here.
Councillor Foster.
Here.
Councillor Gore.
Here.
Councillor Jarrett.
Here.
Councillor Labarge.
Here.
Councillor Maori.
Here.
Councillor Moulton.
Here.
Councillor Nash.
Here.
And Councillor Perry.
Here.
Council President, you have a quorum.
Excellent. Okay. So the first thing on the agenda is we have 3 poll petitions. And I'm expecting these should be relatively quick. First, we have at 7 p.m., public hearing on 23.251, National Grid poll petition for Pleasant Street. Per Mass General Law, Chapter 166, Section 22, the Northampton City Council will hold a public hearing on Thursday, May 18, 2023 at 7 p.m. in council chambers here on Main Street. National Grid's poll petition to install a single-owned pole on Pleasant Street will be considered. The City Council will hear all persons who wish to be heard thereon. I'll entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved. Second.
Motion made by Councilor Jarrett, seconded by Councilor Moulton. Any discussion on opening the public meeting? Hearing none. Laura, roll call, please.
Councillor Elkins.
Yes.
Councillor Foster.
Yes. Sorry, yes.
Councillor Gore.
Yes.
Councillor Jarrett.
Yes.
Councillor Labarge.
Yes.
Councillor Maori.
Yes.
Councillor Moulton.
Yes.
Councillor Nash.
Yes.
And Councillor Perry.
Yes.
Okay, the public hearing is now open, and I believe we have Ken here to, from National Grid to speak to this petition. Ken, are you there?
Yes, good evening.
Welcome, Ken. Okay, let's see. Laura, can you pull this up and get it up on the screen?
Is the picture, the plan?
Yes, that would be helpful. And while she's pulling that up, Ken, if you want to give us an overview.
Yep, so we're looking to install 1 pole on Pleasant Street, about 230 feet south of the intersection of Con Street at the Rotary, for a new service.
There it is. And is there a pole there right now?
Not a pole that is free where we can install equipment.
Okay, what does that mean?
We need a pole that we can put an overhead transformer on, and all the
Uh-huh.
poles that are there are being used for other purposes.
Okay. So this would be an additional pole at that location?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Is there anybody here in the room or on the Zoom who would like to speak to this matter? Okay, hearing and seeing nobody else, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion made by Councilor Labarge and seconded by Councilor Maori. Any discussion on closing the public hearing? Hearing none. Laura, roll call.
Counselor Foster,
Yes.
Counselor Gore,
Yes.
Counselor Jarrett,
Yes.
Counselor Labarge,
Yes.
Counselor Maori,
Yes.
Counselor Moulton,
Yes.
Counselor Nash,
Yes.
Counselor Perry,
Yes.
and Counselor Elkins.
Yes.
Okay, the public hearing on item 23.251, National Grid poll petition for Pleasant Street has been closed, and that item is now will appear on the consent agenda, which we will consider a little later. Next up, we have a public hearing on item 23.254, National Grid poll petition for Maple Street. Per Mass General Law, Chapter 166, Section 22, the Northampton City Council will hold a public hearing on Thursday, May 18th, 2023 at 7:05 p.m. Is that right? Oh, good, we're on time. In council chambers at 212 Main Street, Northampton, on National Grid's petition to install one single-owned pole on Maple Street. The city council will hear all persons who wish to be heard thereon. I will entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
Move to open.
Second.
Motion made by Councilor Moulton and seconded by Councilor Gore. Any discussion on opening the public hearing? Hearing none. Laura, roll call.
Counselor Gore,
Yes.
Counselor Jarrett,
Yes.
Counselor Labarge,
Yes.
Counselor Maori,
Yes.
Counselor Moulton,
Yes.
Counselor Nash,
Yes.
Counselor Perry,
Yes.
Counselor Elkins,
Yes.
and Counselor Foster.
Yes.
Okay, the public hearing is now open for this poll petition for Maple Street. Laura, can you pull the map up? And Ken, you have the floor to describe this petition.
Thank you. So we are looking to install one pole on Maple Street, about 55 feet south of the intersection of Pine Street. Pole's going to be across from existing pole 17, and it's going to be to serve a new control cabinet for Eversource, so they don't have to cross into the roadway.
Oh, there it is. Councilors, any questions relative to this petition? Okay. Is there anybody in the Zoom or in the council chambers who'd like to speak to this? Okay, hearing none, I will entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Move to close.
Second.
Motion made by Councilor Labarge and seconded by Councilor Elkins to close the public hearing. Any discussion? Hearing none. Laura, roll call, please.
Counselor Jarrett,
Yes.
Counselor Labarge,
Yes.
Counselor Maori,
Yes.
Counselor Moulton,
Yes.
Counselor Nash,
Yes.
Counselor Perry,
Yes.
Counselor Elkins,
Yes.
Counselor Foster,
Yes.
and Counselor Gore.
Yes.
Okay, the public hearing on item 23.254, National Grid poll petition for Maple Street has been closed. That item will appear on the consent agenda tonight. The next one, look at that, right on time, 7:10. Public hearing on item 23.255, National Grid poll petition for South Street. I'll repeat this. Per Mass General Law, Chapter 166, Section 22, the Northampton City Council will hold a public hearing on Thursday, May 18, 2023 at 7:10 p.m. in council chambers at 212 Main Street, Northampton, MA, on National Grid's petition to install one single-owned pole on South Street. The city council will hear all persons who wish to be heard thereon. Ken, you have the floor, and Laura, give us a map.
Move to open the public hearing?
Oh,
Second.
thank you. Yes, so motion made by Counselor Jarrett, seconded by Counselor Moulton. Roll call, please.
Counselor Labarge.
Yes.
Counselor Maori.
Yes.
Counselor Moulton.
Yes.
Counselor Nash.
Yes.
Counselor Perry.
Yes.
Counselor Elkins.
Yes.
Counselor Foster.
Yes.
And Counselor Gore.
Yes.
Sorry, and Counselor Jarrett.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so we are now, the public hearing is now open, and Ken, you have the floor, and Laura, a map would be great.
Getting that now.
So this one is a one pole on South Street, about 160 feet northeast of the center line of Fairview. And this is a similar situation where we need a pole across the road for an Eversource gas cabinet.
Okay.
Whoops. Next.
There we go. So what's going in is just like a box?
They are installing control cabinets. They are similar to a traffic cabinet. There are quite a few in town going in right now. Some of them require power for telemetry controls, I believe.
Okay.
And they need a siphon service, so they need a pole to get their power from.
Okay, counselors, any questions? Is there anybody in the Zoom or in the public who would like to share any thoughts on this? Okay, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Close the hearing.
Second.
Motion made by Counselor Labarge, seconded by Counselor Perry to close the public hearing. Any discussion? Hearing none. Laura, roll call, please.
Counselor Perry.
Yes.
Counselor Elkins.
Yes.
Counselor Foster.
Yes.
Counselor Gore.
Yes.
Counselor Jarrett.
Yes.
Counselor Labarge.
Yes.
Counselor Maori.
Yes.
Counselor Moulton.
Yes.
And Counselor Nash.
Yes. Okay, the public hearing on item 23.255, National Grid poll petition for South Street, has been closed. That item will appear on the consent agenda, which we will look to approve later tonight. Next up, it's now time for public comment. And there's a sheet up there. Here, I'll grab it.
You're quicker than I am, man.
Okay, so is the blue sky timer up? Okay, it's there.
Yes.
I'm going to ask that people tonight heed the bell on the blue sky timer. I know sometimes it's hard to hear, but just out of, respect for other people's time. So, okay, so first up, we start with folks in council chambers, and the first person is Debin Bruce, who seems to have some performance piece. Let us know when you're ready, and we'll start
A
the
little
time.
entertainment.
Yeah, okay.
So I'm with a group called Trash Walkers. That's Northampton neighbors interest group that meets and cleans up parks and the library, any public area where we're not on private land, just the public area. We have these, and we have these that we clean it up with, and we get one of those large DPW blue bags every time we go out. And we pay for those to go into the recycle. The problem I want to talk to you about is cigarette butts. And so I have sent around a picture that was taken today, and we cleaned up Pulaski Park a week ago. So the tools that we use to clean up Pulaski Park look like this. You can't pick them up, you have to sweep them up. And there's some confusion about whether a cigarette butt receptacle could go in the park. So I spoke with Amy Hutchins at the health department, and there is a regulation on prohibiting smoking in workplaces and public places. And the confusion seems to be that maybe this means you can't put a receptacle in the park. But the receptacle it is for cigarette butts, but I'm thinking we need some clarity about this, and I will work to either get those receptacles, which are run $100 to $200, get them donated, or get the DPW to order it. But there's an idea that maybe this regulation is making that not a good idea to do in a public park. And it just seems seems like that to me. We need to take care of and on the back of the sheet I passed around to you, cigarette butts are the most abundant form of plastic waste. They're made primarily of cellulose acetate. They can take 10 years to degrade. They contain lots of toxic chemicals. But near and dear to my heart is they're messing up your water system. Thank you.
Wow, that was perfect, yeah. Thank you, Devin. All right, next up is Jacqueline McCreener. Welcome, Jackie.
Hi, good evening. Jacqueline McCreener, Ward 3, Northampton. 2 days ago, on Tuesday, May 16th, Councilor Jarrett, Councilor Moulton, and I took a lovely tour of Smith Charity, located at 51 Main Street in downtown Hampton. We learned a lot of history about Oliver Smith, the Hatfield farmer who left a remarkable will and legacy to Northampton residents and to those living in the surrounding communities. Thanks to Oliver Smith, more than $9 million have been gifted to his beneficiaries, which includes students and apprentices in the trades, as well as nurses, first-time brides, and widows with children under 18 years old. Also thanks to Oliver Smith, we have Smith Vocational and Agricultural High School, and a very active agricultural community with world-renowned and historically significant farmland. This patchwork of open fields, in addition to being beautiful, fertile, and fruitful, sequesters carbon, much like trees that are between the ages of 35 and 200 years old. Oliver Smith, visionary and philanthropist, died in 1845. His legacy has been benefiting Northampton, its residents, and the surrounding communities for going on 200 years. It's time we take the same approach and responsibly steward Northampton and its beautiful built-in natural resources to work to protect them for at least another 200 years. Residents and newcomers are attracted to Northampton for its town and country lifestyle. Visiting Smith Charities reminded me of the importance of responsibly stewarding our precious resources so that we and future generations can continue to benefit from Northampton's beauty, history, and prosperity. Neighborhood conservation districts, known as NCDs, is one way to properly steward Northampton at the residential neighborhood level. This is especially critical now at a time when our city is prioritizing developers who are demolishing our historic homes, trees, and neighborhoods and building very expensive houses in their places. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Okay, next up, we're back in council chambers. We have Daniel Evans of 53 Clark Street.
Yeah. My home away from home, as you know, I've retired to North Carolina. But you'll see me here at least every 2 to 3 months doing another fundraiser. This weekend I'll be up at Florence at the VFW. I think a flyer was sent to y'all. We're raising money for the Survival Center, specifically my Tuskegee Toddlers Fund in my father's name. He was a Tuskegee Airman. And we're raising money for dry butts, diapers, and toddler food. Because Manna, the meals, everybody, the Survival Center, they got plenty of adult food, but no one is focusing on our babies' needs. Anyhow, now that I've said that, let me state this real quick. Okay, humanity is at a financial pinnacle that we as Americans are controlling 20 to 25% of Earth's commerce and total wealth. Americans are only 5% of Earth's population, so do the math. When they tell us, oh, we can't give them that, when we have more money than anyone else in the world, BS. 12 to 15% of America's population controls approximately 80 to 85% of that wealth. Once again, don't tell us they can't give us that. Of the people, for the people, and by the people must not be potential. It must become kinetic. And I appreciate you folks that you understood that already. Okay, the People for Honesty in America and the brothers and sisters of humanity, in tandem with our many associates, endeavor to do the best we can, as much as we can, as long as we can. And bless you people, we're going to add, as honestly as we can, which Washington needs to hear. So stay blessed. I'll see you again soon, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Daniel. Okay, back to the Zoom, and next up is Jackie Balance. Welcome, Jackie. Hold it, did we get you unmuted? Hold on, Jackie. There
Good
you go.
evening, Council. Thank you. I read the proposed changes in compensation for elected officials, and I am absolutely thrilled to see that the councilors can finally expect to earn a living wage. $16,931.20 is kind of an odd amount. I would suggest you just round it off to $16,932. I don't know what you're going to do with that 20 cents, but you deserve it. I sent each of you an email back in March when the city of Houston, Texas passed the Neighborhood Conservation District Ordinance that was to enable pilot projects for specific historic neighborhoods where the traditional historic district criteria did not seem appropriate. Specifically, they want to protect their historic black neighborhoods and working class neighborhoods that don't have the resources that the upper class fancy historical neighborhoods have. And this pilot project will allow the neighborhoods to choose from specific guidelines to guide development. They can control building height, size, and massing, lot size and setbacks, architectural style and materials, and demolitions. The more I've learned about the history of my own neighborhood, Little Bay State Village, the more I want to see our existing mill village visually preserved for posterity. It's amazing, and I'm going to create a self-guided walking tour, or even invite you sometime on a historical tour of Bay State. If we're lucky enough to survive climate catastrophe, and that there is a posterity to appreciate human history, I want Bay State to be there. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Okay, is there anybody else here in council chambers who'd like to speak? Okay, and is there anybody else in the Zoom who would like to speak for public comment? Okay, seeing none, we will move on from public comment, and next is announcements from city councilors and the mayor. We'll start with councilors first, because the mayor is going to have a whole presentation, and maybe she has an announcement. Councilors, any announcements? Councilor Jarrett.
So on Monday, May 29th at 10 a.m. at Trinity Row Park will be the Florence Memorial Day Parade. And I'm going to be there, and I hope you can join.
Thank you. Councilor Maori.
You're looking in there. I would like to announce the budget hearings that the Finance Committee will be holding next week in hybrid form for the public. So that will be Tuesday, May 23rd, 6 p.m. On Tuesday, it will be Central Service. We'll hear from Central Services, Fire and Rescue, DPW and the Department of Health and Human Services. And, you know, the format for budget hearings is a little different. For hybrid, folks can participate remotely or in person. We'll be here in person, but the structure will be different than a regular council meeting. I'm going to have the public comment for each person be limited to 3 minutes instead of 2, and there will be no limit on the total amount of comment. And I think the way I may do it, like we did it last year, which is to have a presentation by a department head, pause, hear comments, then move on to the next presentation, so that because sometimes the department heads actually answer questions in their presentations, but I also don't want to stretch, I want to give folks time to comment in somewhat real time as well. So anyway, so that's Tuesday, May 23rd, and Wednesday, May 24th. Wednesday will be 6 p.m. as well, hybrid as well, and that will be the Northampton Public Schools and the Police Department. So I hope you can join us. It's your chance to chime in about the budget.
Thank you. And one technical note for counselors, we're actually going to convene as the whole council, and then we will recess for finance. So in that way, all of the counselors can attend and also participate with finance in some of the questions, clarifying questions with the mayor and administrators. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Any other announcements? Councilor Perry.
Yes. I just want to let folks know that the Northampton Arts Council is in the midst of their spring grant round, and the deadline is tomorrow, Friday, May 19th. So they've got money for individuals, schools, other creative projects. They have a really simple form on their website, so please check it out and get some of that money and create some art for the city.
Thank you. Any other announcements? Mayor.
Thank you. Good evening, councilors. I would like to announce that Finance Director Nardi and Principal Assessor Dotrout will give a presentation on available tax exemptions for seniors on Friday, June 9th from 1 to 2:30 at the Senior Center. So as always, you can call the assessor's office and get this information, but they're going to give a whole presentation on all the options that are available for our older adults here in Northampton. So again, that's at the Senior Center on Friday, June 9th from 1 to 2:30.
Thank you.
And Mayor, will that be recorded so that people can view it later?
That's a good question. Director Nardi, do you know if there's a plan to have that?
I don't think we plan to record it, but we will put the presentation up online. And certainly, if anybody has any questions, they can absolutely call the assessor's office, and Mark is happy to walk somebody through their individual circumstances.
Councilor Maori.
Yeah, I would suggest you also go over the water sewer exemptions that might be available for.
They're included in that.
Yeah.
Okay, good, excellent.
That's one of the main reasons we're having this presentation.
Yep,
Great.
Yep.
Okay. Mayor, any other announcements? Okay, we're going to move on to presentations. I want to ask council's permission to take some liberties with the agenda here. So the mayor is about to present her fiscal year 2024 budget message. What I would like to do is, and the mayor, as you can see, is remote, and the mayor is actually at a conference right now, so she's zooming in to be with us tonight. What I'd like to do is then move up the financial orders relative to the budget, and so we have the presentation from the mayor, then we consider the financial orders, and then and we'll do some gymnastics there around dividing the question so all counselors can engage in the discussion. And then we'll come back to presentations to hear from the elected officials compensation advisory board, and then skip down to the ordinance, down in ordinances, we'll skip to that matter, and then, once we've dealt with that, we'll go back to the consent agenda and proceed through. Does that sound, I just want to keep the discussions together with the legislation, rather than, so, hearing no
I thought you said gymnastics.
gymnastics, sometimes it is like that. Okay, so, with no further ado, Mayor Scher is here to present the fiscal year 2024 budget. Councilors have all gotten a copy of it. It's available online. It's also available at the library, and one other place? Where is that, Mayor?
So it's available at both libraries, both Lillian Forbes Library, and it's also available in the city clerk's office, the actual physical book. But as you noted, the PDF is online.
Thank you. Okay, Mayor, you have the floor, and you have our ears.
Thank you. Good evening again, councilors. It is my absolute privilege to present the fiscal 2024 budget message to you this evening. Settle in, it's long. To the honorable members of the City Council, I submit for your consideration and approval my proposed $132,312,990 FY 2024 budget for the City of Northampton in accordance with Article 7, Section 7-3 of our charter. The budget is comprised of a $16,659,250 general fund combined with 4 enterprise fund budgets for water at $6,945,000, sewer $6,177,500, solid waste at $534,754, and stormwater and flood control $1,996,486. This budget proposal represents a 4.77% increase from the current FY 2023 City of Northampton budget that ends with the fiscal year on June 30th, 2023. By any measure, this moment in our nation's and Northampton's history is a time of uncertainty and change. The official end of the COVID-19 public health emergency on May 11th, 23, is merely the latest among a host of social, economic, climate, and political forces that dictate an active response. As your mayor, I am committed to addressing these challenges head-on and ensuring the well-being and prosperity of our city. In my previous year's budget message, I shared with you my deep commitment to the financial health of Northampton and my desire to reaffirm the fiscal policies outlined in the Fiscal Stability Plan as the best way to secure the city's future. That plan responded to the fallout from the financial pressures created by the 2008 financial crisis, where the city had expended nearly all of its reserves and struggled to deliver core services while keeping up with rising costs. The goal was to create a solid foundation upon which to build a stable government that could then focus on meeting future challenges. Today, our reserves are in a strong position and our financial ratings remain high. Yet, recurring revenues continue to fail to keep up with the rising costs of providing city services. Now, in my second year in this office, it is more apparent than ever that all policy priorities and service delivery capacity stem from a strong financial position. Our annual budget shortfalls cannot be solved with savings accounts. Since property tax revenue increases are limited to 2.5% each year, the only option to meet rising costs other than overrides is to maximize local receipts revenue and encourage new growth in Northampton. Even before the pandemic, Florence Center and downtown Northampton retail, restaurants, and entertainment businesses faced significant pressure. The pandemic profoundly affected local receipts revenue, including our hotel, motel, and short-term rental receipts, meals tax receipts, and parking revenue. Thanks to our concerted efforts to bring people back downtown through outdoor dining and programming, we have seen most local revenue lines almost fully rebound, except for cannabis revenue and, to a lesser extent, parking revenues, which reflect explainable changing market forces. Further economic development, human services, and climate change are not isolated issues. They are interconnected and require a comprehensive and sustainable approach. Initiatives like the Picture Main Street project, the Resilience Hub, and the creation of 2 new areas of city services with the Division of Community Care, DCC, and the Climate Action and Project Administration CAPA Department represent an investment in Northampton's future necessary to ensure our continued safety and success as a community. In addition to the real needs they address, these projects also help position Northampton for smart future growth and economic success. Over the past few years, we have witnessed the resilience and determination of our community. We must continue to push forward to reimagine how we remain competitive in the post-pandemic modern economy. More and more is being asked of local governments. While less and less of our tax dollars return to Northampton from state and federal governments, Northampton residents need and ask for more than ever from our city. People have grown increasingly frustrated with their ability to impact the national and regional political landscape. They've shifted their focus and expectations onto local government to provide not only traditional city and school services, but also a bold response to climate change, social justice in all city services, answers to economic pressures that have resulted in vacant storefronts, and to ensure that our most vulnerable residents receive the help that they need. This year's budget represents movement forward for key initiatives grounded in the values and expressed priorities of the City of Northampton and our community. It also represents some adjustments and realignment by the city, both as an employer and as a government service provider navigating the current economic climate and labor market. The impact of the Great Resignation and tightening of the labor market during the pandemic has also been experienced by the city, and we are actively building back our city staff, though there are still areas where we have vacancies. Due to vacancies and reduced staff in certain departments, the city has had to rely on overtime to meet critical and necessary staffing levels. This budget seeks to address some areas of this inefficient and expensive use of taxpayer resources and to build towards more reasonable, respectful, and safe staffing levels. Salary obligations to city and school employees are the largest portion of the budget. Still, other significant fixed costs for benefits and insurance need to be balanced by the FY24 general fund. Health insurance, at $13.2 million, is the operational budget's largest fixed cost line item. While the most subscribed non-Medicare health plan, Health New England, increased by 9.7%, Medicare plans only increased an average of 1.5%. The smaller Medicare plan increases and a shift among subscribers from family to individual plans kept the overall total health insurance increase down to 4.5%. Though the city is experiencing increases of 14.5%, 15%, and 31% in insurance costs for property and auto, general liability, and public employee liability, respectively, all of which put pressure on the budget. To meet our retirement system assessment, the city's appropriation for FY24 is increasing by $419,173, or 5.94%, for a total of $7,480,027. This year's contribution to the Other Post-Employment Benefits, or OPEB, trust fund is $375,000. Increases across the general fund departmental categories are primarily due to contractual salary obligations following contract negotiations this past year, with some noted exceptions. As always, a look back was done on operations and maintenance, also known as OM, to ensure proper budgeting for departmental operations, and adjustments were made when possible. In general government, the most significant change in the FY 2024 budget is the debut of the Climate Action and Project Administration CAPA Department. The people of Northampton have challenged their government to lead the way on climate change. In 2021, the City of Northampton clearly articulated in the Sustainable Northampton Comprehensive Plan and Resilience Regeneration Plan many ambitious goals to meet a 2030 target for carbon neutrality for city operations and a 2050 target for net zero carbon emissions citywide. The plan recognizes the imperative for Northampton's residents and leaders to, quote, grow and change with a full understanding of this generation's responsibility to leave behind a community that will not compromise the ability of future generations to meet their needs. This means learning to be smarter about how we use our resources, creatively thinking about patterns of consumption and usage, end quote. In response, I, supported by a group of committed residents, identified the need for a director-level position that will guide the city's efforts to realize the goals outlined in the comprehensive plan. A department head level position that reports directly to the city's chief executive officer has the highest potential to succeed in bringing about the changes necessary to meet the city's environmental goals. This person will be supported by the city's existing energy and sustainability officer position and the city's chief procurement officer. Together, they will bring an environmental lens and best practice project management techniques to the city's initiatives, projects, and procurement, and be a resource for residents working to decarbonize. The Information Technology Services ITS department covers all ITS, telecommunications needs, and information security for the city, Northampton Public Schools, and the Enterprise Fund departments. To meet the ever-increasing ITS needs, the department is now redistributing some work and responsibilities, including elevating 2 employees to more senior roles to recognize the pressure these rising demands play on the Chief Information Officer. I want to note that there are additional staffing needs in ITS that the budget isn't currently able to support. An increase to the ITS OM budget is due to a requirement from the city's insurance provider. The city add additional cybersecurity services, as attacks on schools, municipalities, and government agencies have dramatically increased in the last 2 years. Central Services Department provides a foundational support for all city operations, managing and maintaining the city's buildings, energy systems, and operational supplies, janitorial services, and ensuring that many critical contract services are executed according to their agreements. As the city plans to purchase and build new physical assets and its existing infrastructure ages, a higher standard of environmental efficiency is demanded. The workload on central services increases as we work to decarbonize our facilities and operations. Even before the Energy and Sustainability Officer position was moved to the newly created CAPA department, central services needed additional project management support for its many critical responsibilities. The addition of a facilities project coordinator will help meet these increasing demands and help us capitalize on available funding sources for climate innovation. In the public safety sector, Northampton Fire Rescue had its busiest year on record with 8,352 calls for service, which is an increase of 9% over last year's increase of 14%. Northampton is also experiencing increased calls for its assistance by mutual aid. One of the national workforce shortages is for paramedics, and as private EMS providers in other communities lack the staff to respond to emergency calls, Northampton's EMS is being asked to provide more mutual aid. Fire Rescue is also experiencing a large increase in its mandated review and inspection services due to an update to the Massachusetts Fire Code in December 2022. A fire prevention officer must now review all blueprints for residential solar panel installations, make corrections if needed, and inspect the completed installation. Additionally, all energy storage systems that are 1 kilowatt or greater must now be inspected and permitted by the fire prevention officer. To meet these new state-mandated requirements, as well as the over 1,000 current annual inspections conducted by Fire Rescue, an additional fire prevention officer position has been added, which will be offset by the associated inspection fees. The national staffing shortage of police officers, coupled with the staffing reduction from the FY 2021 budget cut, and the loss of 49 officers in the last 5 years, continues to be a central concern for the Northampton Police Department. The hiring and training process is long, with the time from applying to serving dependent on when the state is running an applicable academy. At a minimum, the process is over a year. There is also potential at every step that a candidate will not meet all requirements and will not advance. These factors contribute to the department's continual need to recruit and hire to fill vacancies. The NPD averages a shortage of 8.5 officers a month, or 21.25% of its patrol officers. This shortage has a significant impact on both the ability to serve the community and on the department and the officers. There are not enough patrol officers to meet the call demand. In the last year, every month there have been at least 30 calls and as many as 77 calls for which there was not an available patrol officer to respond. In addition to being unable to meet the community's public safety needs, there is a very significant financial impact of this shortage on the city and taxpayers. From July 2022 to September 2022, the department averaged 431 hours of overtime per month, paid at time and a half to maintain minimum patrol coverage. That is significantly more than was budgeted for the current fiscal year. To budget for that level of overtime in FY24, the overtime line would need to be doubled to $456,098. While some of the overtime hours are signed hours that officers take voluntarily, a significant portion is forced overtime, where officers are held over after working a full shift because there is no other officer to fill the following shift. Frequently forcing officers to work a double shift results in fatigue, safety and liability concerns, and staff burnout, further contributing to the retention problem. To address this service level and financial issue, work towards creating a better and safer working environment, and assist the increased need to recruit and hire continually, we are instituting a plan that would enable NPD to hire student officers for expected and unexpected vacant positions which occur as a result of retirements and increased officer turnover. This will allow the continual movement of new hires throughout the year, preventing the 12 to 18-month waiting period that currently exists. In addition to health and safety benefits for our officers and community members, this plan would cost less and is a more responsible use of taxpayer funds. Under Health and Human Services, the restructure of the Northampton Health Department to the Northampton Department of Health and Human Services, DHHS, continues to refine service delivery in the city in recognition of the increased role of public health in municipal life marked by the COVID era, the opioid epidemic, and the recognition that racism is a public health emergency. These mandates, combined with traditional public health nursing and inspection services, are well served by the now specialized divisions of the DHHS under Commissioner Meredith O'Leary. This year, one such division of DHHS, the Division of Community Care, built a multidisciplinary training program for the Community Care Response Team, CCRT, and contracted with the UMass Center for Program Evaluation to create an assessment and evaluation protocol. With the hiring of DCC Director Kristen Rhodes and DCC Coordinator Natalia Birch, the division is now hiring the CCRT, the Community Care Response Team, and planning the types of public safety response for which the DCC will respond. When assembled, the response team will engage in over 150 hours of training and begin operations. The DCC website is now up and running and provides information and connection of resources. In addition to being reached by phone during operating hours, the DCC staff is also creating a community room that will serve as walk-in access to the DCC in a temporary location in the Roundhouse building until the space in the Resilience Hub is ready. Another project initiated by the Mayor's Office and led by the DCC this year in collaboration with national experts at Human in Common was a racial justice, equality, and inclusion training attended by more than 100 City of Northampton leaders and staff, with plans for this to lead to better defined citywide policies in racial justice and equity initiative space. A large additional source of funding for DCC in the last year that assisted its development was the Department of Public Health's Equitable Advancements for Public Safety Grants, EAPS. Funding for EAPS was not in the governor's budget for FY24, though there is hope that it will be reinstated in the final state budget. The DCC is funded for operation this year through the general fund, and we await news about whether those additional funds will continue. Senior Services is on track to fully restore many of its services as one of the most profoundly affected departments by the COVID-19 pandemic. Given that older adults are among the most vulnerable populations, activities at Northampton Senior Center were the last to receive clearance to resume. That said, Director Kim Park worked hard to welcome back older adults to programming at the center, welcoming 200 new members and 151 returning members in the first half of FY 2023 alone. Daily attendance is rebounding, transportation services have been restored, and the culture is widely reported to be positive and welcoming. The hope is to restart facility rentals once core delivery service targets are met. Senior Services budget is slightly increased this year due to an increase in the cost of its contract with the Daily Hampshire Gazette for assistance in creating and printing the popular Collins Street Chronicle publication. Veterans Services has continued serving Northampton's veterans and the 10 other communities served by the Central Hampshire Veterans Services District. Once again, its operating and maintenance budgets show a decrease, but it is important to note that the level of service provided to veterans is in no way diminished. The budget decrease, which continues the trend of the previous 6 years, reflects the adjustments to the benefits and insurance lines as World War II and Korean War veterans have passed, leaving fewer veterans receiving benefits. The state Chapter 115 veterans benefits are reimbursed by the Commonwealth at 75% and potentially 100% for houseless veterans. Northampton will continue to invest in veteran services and find new outreach models like the public access and YouTube show started this year to ensure that Northampton veterans receive the benefits that they have been promised. In the Department of Public Works, there is an increase in the Highway Division to provide more funding for street paving and marking, and there is additional funding for annual maintenance of the radio project being implemented this year. The maintenance of the system is now being overseen by the DPW and it has moved out of the Public Safety Communications Center budget. The 4 enterprise funds, water, sewer, solid waste, and stormwater and flood control, are mostly level funded and self-sustaining. The reserves in the funds will be used to support the operational and capital projects budgets for each utility. There was no usage rate increases for FY 2024. However, the planned departure of Coca-Cola in December 2023, after operating in Northampton for 65 years and comprising a quarter of the city's water and sewer enterprise revenue, will result in a nearly 25% drop in each of the water and sewer enterprises' annual income, totaling about $2.3 million. This necessitated an increase in base rate fees in the water enterprise and the creation of a base rate fee in the sewer enterprise. This approach, approved by the City Council, allowed for the greatest flexibility in providing exemptions for lower income residents. This FY 2024 budget continues to show the city's support for Smith Vocational and Agricultural High School, with an increase of $76,831. Communities that send students to Smith Voc pay an assessment of $20,076 per student, plus special education costs. The tuition rates are set annually by the Department of Education and Secondary Education. While applications are still being processed and the numbers will change, it's projected that an estimated 445 students from outside the district and 96 Northampton students will attend Smith Voc in the 23-24 school year. Northampton students make up 17.8% of the Smith Voc student population. The largest expenditure increase in this proposed budget is the appropriation to the Northampton Public Schools, which will increase by $1,406,375 or 4% to $36,565,747. In addition to the $1.4 million increase from the general fund, I am recommending an additional $1.2 million increase be appropriated from the Fiscal Stability Stabilization Fund for the Northampton Public Schools budget. As I wrote in my budget message last year, quote, in FY 2023, the MPS budget relies on a significant portion of reserved school of choice funds. The use of these funds is exceeding school of choice revenue, drawing down the fund balance at a rate that will result in a significant budget gap next year. Additionally, one-time federal COVID-19 elementary and secondary school emergency relief ESSER funds are being used to support and grow the FY23 MPS budget on some recurring and compounding expenses, not just one-time expenditures. The use of reserves greater than incoming revenue and one-time federal funds to such a degree will create a gap that will exceed the city's capacity to raise additional revenue to cover it. And I am concerned about our ability to maintain our educational programs and staffing at current levels in near future years, end quote. These last few years have been extremely trying on the district and all school districts as we have navigated the pandemic and students have needed additional support. The need for school districts to address the looming fiscal cliff as federal ESSER funds sunset is being discussed nationwide. As predicted, the reliance on one-time emergency relief, depleting school choice revolving account, and the additional $250,000 with no recurring revenue source voted by the school committee to balance the MPS budget last year left a significant budget gap in the MPS budget for FY 2024 of $2.3 million. I was uncomfortable with the proposal to fill some of the shortfall with the possibility of FY 23 unspent funds or tailings, which are not guaranteed and risked additional mid-year cuts if the budgeted amounts didn't materialize. I believe that this shortfall is too large to responsibly solve through drastic cuts in one FY 2024 budget year. And I urge the City Council to approve the use of $1.2 million from the Fiscal Stability Stabilization Fund. Whether from the $5.9 million in federal COVID relief aid NPS has received, the school choice revolving fund, or from city stabilization funds, relying on non-recurring revenue for a recurring expense automatically indicates a deficit. School choice and stabilization funds may be added to annually if there are funds to add, like a savings account, but they aren't a consistent or guaranteed revenue source. Using the one-time funds for salaries will cause a larger deficit the following year because most municipal salaries have automatic cost of living increases and step increases, and some, schools being one of them, also have potential lane shift increases. The use of $1.2 million of fiscal stability stabilization funds is a one-time use. In pledging it, I proposed a 2-year plan to work to balance the school budget and return NPS to strong fiscal principles. These funds allow for decreased reductions this year, which can be achieved by attrition. There will need to be additional reductions next year, as the last of the ESSER funds will have been expended. And the hope is that with smart management, they can also be done by attrition. The district is thrilled to welcome Dr. Portia Bonner as the new Northampton Public Schools Superintendent of Schools on July 1st, 2023. I have asked the new administration for a plan with additional spending reductions for FY 2025 by December 2023, earlier in the annual budget process than usual. It will be challenging, but I look forward to working closely with Dr. Bonner and the school committee on this plan to return to the consistent and reliable funding that the fiscal stability plan has afforded schools and city operations. Part of this 2-year plan is to continue to work together as a district, city, and community, along with our state legislators, to appeal to the Commonwealth for increased state aid and fairer funding formulas. There was great hope last year that the Fair Share Amendment would provide a new revenue stream to equitably support public education across the Commonwealth and ease the burden on most Northampton taxpayers. As I noted in last year's message, if passed, quote, we must fight to ensure that fair share is applied in a way that benefits all communities, including Northampton, end quote. The Fair Share Amendment did pass with considerable support from Northampton as we voted 82% in favor of it. Concerningly, initial proposals in the governor's budget call for only a small percentage to be allocated to K-12 education. And so the fight goes on, and we add this to our advocacy to change the embedded state funding inequities that leave our district and city in an increasing financial bind. Northampton's Chapter 70 state aid has remained stagnant for over 20 years, while required net school spending has steadily increased. The city's general fund makes up and far exceeds the difference in support of the Northampton Public Schools. In FY23, the city expended $10,253,760, or 29.8% over required net school spending. And it is expected that in FY 2024, the city will spend at least $12 million, or over 30% over net school spending. The Senate Ways and Means budget includes a proposed increase in Chapter 70 per student allocation that would increase Northampton state aid as a minimum aid community by $166,980 for MPS and Smithville together, while required net school spending determined by formula by the state increased by $1,518,086. Another significant challenge for Northampton is the unfair funding formula for charter schools and its inadequate mitigation reimbursement from the state. The city covers the charter school sending tuition assessed by the state and holds the school budget harmless for it. This amount is projected in the Senate Ways and Means budget to be $2,916,535 this year. It is possible that FY 2025 will see the sending tuition paid out of the general fund top $3 million. The charter mitigation reimbursement comes to the general fund. Still, even when fully funded by the state, the formula is limited to reimbursement at diminishing percentages for only the first 3 years a student attends a charter school. 100% reimbursement from the state means that the first year of a student's enrollment in the charter school is reimbursed at 100%, then 60% for that student for the second year, and 40% for the third year. And there is no reimbursement for any year after 3 years. Northampton's estimated reimbursement for FY24 is $571,731, leaving the net loss of tuition revenue that needs to be covered by the city at $2,344,804. There is a net positive on other students who choice into Northampton Public Schools versus those who choose to attend another public school district. Revenue for students who choice into Northampton Public Schools goes directly to the MPS district, to the school choice revolving account, while school choice sending tuition is paid by the city. In FY24, the general fund will lose a projected $676,505, and the MPS school choice revolving account will gain a projected $1.23 million. In FY 2019, 6 years into the multi-year fiscal stability plan, funding for MPS was 24%, or $5,700,492 higher than the FY 2013 funding level when the plan was implemented. The fiscal stability plan was renewed by the voters of Northampton on March 3rd, 2020, with a Proposition 2.5 general override of $2.5 million. Due to the economic and general uncertainty the pandemic brought in the weeks after the override vote, its implementation was delayed to FY22. This coming fiscal year will be 11 years into the fiscal stability plan, and with this budget, funding for the MPS budget has increased by 52%, and it is $12,562,104 higher than the FY 2013 budget. And that is not including that one-time infusion of $1.2 million from the Fiscal Stability Stabilization Fund. This is strong evidence that the plan and the city's commitment to funding its schools with stable annual increases has worked and has been sustained. I reflect back to 2019 because that fiscal year was a turning point in the fiscal stability plan, and this year is as well. The Fiscal Stability Stabilization Fund was created with the remainder of the 2013 $2.5 million general override funds after the portion needed to maintain schools and city services was appropriated to the general fund. It wasn't until 2019 that the fund first needed to be drawn upon to support the budget and maintain services, as careful adherence to the plan and strong economic growth allowed the 4-year plan to last 7 years. The FY 2024 budget is the first drawdown from the funds since the March 2020 override was implemented in 2022. If approved, the FY 2024 budget will use $1,284,954 from the Fiscal Stability Stabilization Fund, $1.2 million for the Northampton Public School budget, and $84,954 to support the creation of the Climate Action and Project Administration Department budget. The Fiscal Stability Plan has given the City of Northampton and its 2 school districts job and service stability for a decade. It's built on the recognition that in order to provide the annual increases needed to maintain city services, support our schools, and continue to evolve to meet the issues and needs of our time, absent commensurate local and state revenue increases. At a point in the multi-year plan, the fund will need to be drawn upon. That reliance on the fund will increase the next year until a tipping point is reached, needing another override, as it would be overdrawn or it would go off the cliff in the next year. The crisis in the Northampton Public Schools budget has brought us to a more significant use of the Fiscal Stability Stabilization Fund in year 3 of the Fiscal Stability Plan than was expected. The plan is updated every year with budget changes to reflect new growth and other revenue. The current modeling of the plan continues to show that to maintain the planned 4% increase for both school districts and level city services, another Proposition 2.5 general override will be needed in FY25 that would be implemented in FY26. However, this is also contingent on the Northampton Public Schools adhering to the plan and creating a balanced budget within that planned increase in FY25. As we model how much we will need to rely on the Fiscal Stability Stabilization Fund this fiscal year and next to balance budget, the other non-property tax revenue sources are an important part of the picture. Fiscal year 2023 continued the growth seen in hotel, motel, and meals tax thanks to the collaborative work of the Mayor's Office Economic Development Team and the Arts and Culture Department with downtown businesses and their associations. While there is robust activity downtown leading to increased hotel, motel, and meals taxes, parking fund revenues in FY24 are projected for a second year at a conservative $1.2 million based on performance in FY23. This still represents a 40% reduction of annual revenues from the parking fees pre-COVID. While the revenues are higher than their pandemic low in FY21, it continues to lag, and we're beginning to view this as a new normal. Adult use cannabis revenue continued to drop each quarter in FY23. We are again lowering the revenue prediction, which was $975,000 in FY 2023, to $800,000 for FY 2024. It is unknown where it will settle as many neighboring states begin adult use retail sales this year. I often get asked, where does the pot money go? It goes into the general fund. Since sales began mid-FY 2019, the revenue has helped support schools and services, and as a new revenue source, it helped extend the previous override. One specific position that was added from this revenue source is the Northampton Prevention Coalition Coordinator position. The position was previously funded by a federal grant in the Northampton Public Schools budget. After 10 years, that grant was not eligible for renewal in FY 2022. Instead of losing the position and its important work to prevent or reduce youth substance use, it was brought into the Department of Health and Human Services and supported by cannabis revenue. As we approach the upcoming fiscal year, we have reason to be hopeful for the future of our city. We have ambitious plans and a strong drive towards progress and long-term success. At the same time, we must also address the financial hurdles and carefully plan our resources. I'm committed to finding the right balance between responsible fiscal management and implementing innovative and forward-thinking policies. I want to express my very sincere appreciation for the dedicated individuals who work tirelessly for our city and schools. It is their unwavering commitment that fuels our collective efforts. Let us move forward with a shared belief in our city's potential and a determination to overcome our challenges to realize that potential. I offer thanks and appreciation for those who helped write and develop this budget and who support me every day. Finance Director Charlene Nardi has guided the city with great care and remarkable financial judgment this past year, and this budget reflects a tremendous amount of her work and expertise. Thanks to Chief of Staff Alan Wolf, who juggles all manner of city issues while supporting me and city departments and working daily to support the budget with the attention he brings to economic development. Partnering with him on economic development is Annie Lesko, who also deftly wears many other hats in the mayor's office, including as our expert editor of documents like this budget. Abby Stone, our COVID-19 Economic Recovery Grants Administrator, manages the grants we've received and 61 ARPA community recovery grants that we awarded this year. And she's always ready to pitch in and help, and I'm grateful. And I want to give very special thanks to Cort Klein, who made compiling and completing this FY 2024 budget a priority as he transitioned out of the mayor's office and into his new position in planning and sustainability. I thank him for the lovely cover and all the work he did this year and in previous years to serve the community and bring the budget document together. I also want to acknowledge the city's department heads who work with Finance Director Nardi and me to develop and refine their department budgets to keep within financial constraints while still meeting demands and providing excellent services. Their dedication and that of the staff they oversee to the city and its residents inspires me daily, and it is my great privilege to serve with. And lastly, thank you to the City Council for your diligent and thoughtful service to our city. I look forward to working with you through the rest of the budget process to answer any questions about this budget proposal and provide additional information. Respectfully submitted, Gina Louise Shara, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay. Thank you, Mayor. That was terrific. Thank you for that. And I'd like to, I think what I want to do is divide the question first, and then that will allow everybody to speak a little more freely about, and comment and ask questions. Does that sound good, Councilor Chair?
Sure, we're skipping the budgetary transfers item. We'll do that later.
Well, what I'd like to, I think we'll move that down, and let's address within the financial orders B through G. We'll address those items with the mayor here. They have to do with the budget, and then we'll come back up to the top to item A. But I think if we're tackling these, we want to start with item B. And for item B, I think you want to say something, and then you're going to step out to the audience.
Yes, so thank you. So I have a conflict of interest as a member of the Pedal People Cooperative, which has a pre-existing contract with the Central Services Department. So that's a contract that was in place from before I was elected. And so Council President Nash has agreed to accommodate this by dividing the motion. So we'll consider, you'll consider that item separately.
Yes.
And I'll return at that, after the motion's been divided, I'll return to participate in a discussion about everything in the general fund except that item. So, thank you very much.
Counselor, I'll let you, you'll know when we're back. Okay. Okay, so council, next up, I'd like to entertain a motion to adopt, motion to put adoption of the fiscal year 2024 general fund budget on the floor to discuss.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion made by Counselor Elkins, seconded by Counselor Moulton. Okay, so that is now on the floor. Laura, do we vote at this point? No.
No, we would divide the question.
Okay. Now, I will entertain a motion to divide the question to separately consider the OM budget of the parking division. That is the parking division maintenance budget. The OM for the maintenance budget is $268,576, and the item that the Councilor Jarrett was referring to is within that. And what we're going to do is we're going to take that and set it aside, and that'll allow us to discuss everything else in the general fund budget. So can I get a motion to do that?
Move to divide the question. Second.
Motion made by Councilor Maori, seconded by Councilor Elkins, to divide the question to separately consider the OM budget of the parking division. Okay, now we vote on the motion to divide the question. We have the motion on the floor. Is there any discussion on the motion? Is anybody confused? Good. Laura, roll call, please.
Okay. Counselor Moulton.
Yes.
Counselor Nash.
Yes.
Counselor Perry.
Yes.
Counselor Elkins.
Yes.
Counselor Foster.
Yes.
Counselor Gore.
Yes.
Counselor Jarrett is recused. Counselor Labarge.
Yes.
And Counselor Maori.
Yes.
Okay, so, and then we have one more vote here, right?
That's correct.
We are going to now vote on the main motion, which is to discuss the fiscal year 2024 budget with the parking division maintenance OM budget now removed. I will entertain a motion for that. Or do we already have a motion, Laura?
The motion, yeah, that's
Okay,
going back to
great.
the main motion already.
Okay, thank you. All right, so, but we do vote, right?
Yes.
Okay. Roll call on that.
Counselor Nash.
Yes.
Counselor Perry.
Yes.
Counselor Elkins.
Yes.
Counselor Foster.
Yes.
Counselor Gore.
Yes.
And Counselor Jarrett is again recused. Counselor Labarge.
Yes.
Counselor Maori.
Yes.
And Counselor Moulton.
Yes.
Okay, we are now ready to discuss the general fund budget with the parking division maintenance removed, and we can welcome Counselor Jarrett back. I got it right. Right, Laura? Okay.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. All right. And with that, now we can more freely talk about the general fund budget. And so, counselors, any questions or comments for the mayor? All of that work and no questions. Counselor Jarrett, thank you.
Yeah, I can go first. So thank you again for accommodating the conflict that I had. So yeah, Mayor, once again, I think you've done an excellent job at balancing the varied needs that we have here in the city. I haven't read all of it yet since we've only had it for a day, but I'm generally very pleased with what I'm reading. I did have a question about the DPW and wondering about our vacancies at the DPW. I know that's been a pretty serious concern for a while. Have we been able to raise wages to attract people? And I guess, I hear about the current step system where folks who are coming in start at a lower step, and it takes them a long time to get higher on the steps in order to make higher wages. Hearing that may need an overhaul since we've continued to have vacancies for so long, and I'm wondering is there a plan in place to look at that system and any changes that may need to happen?
Thank you for that. So, we can talk about this in depth with Director LaScalia as well next week. But, we did go through collective bargaining last year, and I think reached agreements that we are hopeful are going to help us recruit more folks and increase that staffing. We're also in the process of, we have a home rule petition at the state about civil service, and one of the main reasons that we really wanted to pursue that was to be able to increase the pool from which we could get applicants. So there are a few, I feel like this is something that we were very mindful of in the last year on how we can help fill those vacancies.
Great, thank you. And then I had the question about the schools. So I'm trying to better understand the $1.2 million you're taking from or proposing to take from the Fiscal Stabilization Fund. So that is part of a 2-year plan, but it all goes in this coming fiscal year. I'm sorry if I haven't fully grasped that, but
it's complicated. So the deficit that we were looking at in the schools, and again, interim superintendent can speak to this too next week, was estimated at $2.3 million. Now, the plan that they were initially putting forward was going to try and fill some of that gap by using ESSER funds. So again, it's using one-time funds, but also using something called tailings. Tailings is sort of like the equivalent of free cash, right? It's funds left over at the end of the year, unexpended funds, whether from vacancies or for whatever reason. And so that number is not really known what it's going to be, and there was a proposal to use a pretty sizable amount of money that the hope was they would come from tailings, and it would fill part of that gap. That was not something that I was comfortable with, because they're not guaranteed funds. The amount proposed to be used was, I believe, larger than usually is what's seen for tailings. And another really concerning thing about that plan is if it wasn't realized at the amount which it had been budgeted for, it would have made for cuts that would have to be made while the school year was in process, right? So not sort of this end of the year where you have people who are going to be leaving the district anyway, and you can try and get any cuts done through attrition by, if someone's leaving, just not filling that position and then moving the people that remain maybe to a different spot. If the tailings didn't materialize, then you could be looking suddenly at cuts when the school year was underway, and students had teachers and they had paras, and there was, things were already rolling. And so that, I think, is much more disruptive than sort of during the turnover at the end of the school year before the new school year. So that was something that just made me really uncomfortable. So I didn't want to do that gamble, or have that gamble. So this $1.2 million, it doesn't fill the entire gap, but so there were cuts that have been made this year, and And I was very clear that there are additional cuts that will have to be made next year for us to be able to make it whole. But this helped sort of ease or make for more a more gentle transition back to kind of a reasonable, steady increase of 4%, which is what the fiscal stability plan is built on.
Mm-hmm. And if the tailings come in positively, that will help us in the following year.
Yeah, that's a great point. So if the tailings that do come in, that then means they can go into the school choice fund, right? So they can start building up that reserve account again. So one of the reasons they got into a hole is that their revolving fund that had sort of planned use, it's similar to the fiscal stability stabilization fund. It would have this planned use that they would use some amount each year, but it was never more than what they brought in. Then it started to tip, the balance started to tip, and now they have a big hole there. So we can, the hope is to start building that fund back up so that it can serve, again, kind of like what free cash does on the city side, where you have an unexpected expenditure, which does happen in schools. You can have, a student move into the district who has needs that need to be met, and that could be sort of a sudden expenditure that wasn't budgeted for. So that is often what that fund used to be used for, so we really need to build that back up.
Great, thank you. And my last question had to do with the police budget, and the question is, how does this proposed police budget fit into the recommendations of the Northampton Policing Review Commission? But I did want to sort of put a note before and talk about inflation and budgets. So I note that I looked up from 2020 to 2023, the cumulative inflation was 17.2%. That was, I think, Consumer Price Index. So, and then if we go back to fiscal year 21, we had a police budget of 5.7 million was our actual spending on a budgeted amount of 6 million. And so if we bringing that forward with that amount of inflation is the equivalent of 6.7 million today, or a budgeted amount of 7 million. And so since the actual is usually less than budgeted, budgeting for 6.8 million is certainly within a range of inflation. So from that perspective, we're maintaining, well, it's a level amount of funding. It's not an expansion. So that, if you or agree, I don't know, that was my assessment, and would like to hear if you're in agreement with that. But so I'm also seeing that this plan doesn't actually, its goal is not to increase the total number of personnel hours. Its goal is to allow for more people, which means less overtime. Do I have that generally right as well?
Kind of. What it allows for is flexibility to be able to hire to start the hiring process.
Right.
So it is an incredibly long process, and we're somewhat dependent on the state and when the state is going to run an academy. So from the minute someone sort of puts in an application and we start looking at them to then then there's a whole background check time, so that's like 3 months. And then from that point, it's dependent on when the next academy is. And then there's the academy, and then there's field training. So the whole process very often is at least 18 months. So this creates flexibility there's no money in the budget now for if let's say you have, this just happened last week or the week before, an officer retired. And the chief knew this officer was going to retire, but she couldn't then try and hire for that position until the retirement because there was no money in the budget to do that. So it would enable the PD to be able to look at the vacancies that they know are coming up and start to plan for them, but also give them flexibility with, we have lost, in the last few years, we've lost a lot of officers, and so there's just this continual need to be hiring, but there isn't actually budget for that. So this just helps us fight that really long lag time that happens. So hopefully, so that will just hopefully be able to get us to a place where we have more stable staffing and we can cut down on the overtime. The overtime is really, it's a tremendous expense to the city. And then, you know, we'll talk next week also about the other impacts of all of those forced hours or the overtime hours on the officers and on the community and you know, what we want that to look like.
Yeah, and so I guess coming back to my first question, you know, this is in, do you see this as in line with the NPRC's recommendations? As far as, you know, we're maintaining, you know, we're starting a number of other services, right? We have the community care division rather, that is not quite yet up, and we need to see how that goes, how that works with the other departments, and we're maintaining a police force at a level state while we are continuing to work on expanding the alternative options. Would you say that's correct?
Yeah, I would say that you said that really well. I think it's in line with, you know, the NPRC report is clear that they, you know, there's a recognition that we will maintain a police department. So my goal is to maintain one in the safest way possible and that meets the needs. And right now, you know, as I said, we're not meeting the needs. There are a lot of calls for which there isn't an available response.
Thank you.
All right, let's go Councilor Maori and then Councilor Foster.
Yeah, I was just going to say, build on that and just say I'll be curious. I'm going to hold off my specific questions, but I'll be curious to see what, you know, to unpack those calls and see what, you know, the vision is for what will be covered by our mental health task force or the Department of Community Care in the future and how we're going to anticipate that. So I guess I'll be talking to the chief about that next week.
I mean, actually, probably Commissioner O'Leary would perhaps.
Yes, right. That's right. Both, that's true. Yes. I feel like I had another question.
Come back. Councilor Foster.
Thank you. Thanks, Mayor. It's clear how much work you and your staff, department heads and the mayor's office staff have put into this. And I appreciate your budget message. Honestly, I think it should be required listening and or reading for every Northampton resident. Not to, I know it's lengthy, but it's important information. I have two very quick questions and then one slightly longer philosophical question. The first is my quick math, I don't think got me to an accurate answer. What is the total, just I'm sure you have it at the tip of your tongue, percentage of the budget that the schools, what percentage of the budget is the funding for Northampton Public Schools? Do you know, like, yeah.
Director Nardi, do you happen to know that? I'm not sure. We always work up that for the January presentation or the early February presentation. I'm not sure that we.
So, yeah, we didn't actually break out for just the Northampton Public Schools, but total education out of the general fund is 41.6%. And then if you actually go to the expenditure summary page, if you give me a minute, I can tell you exactly what it is.
Sure. Well, you looked that up, Director Nardi. Mayor, maybe I can ask you another question. If you know, or if Chief Casper could talk about this when she presents next week, we talked about the increase in calls to fire rescue services, and that was pretty striking. And I'm curious how the call volume of NPD has been over the last few years. I understand that officers aren't always able to respond, but I'm just curious kind of what that's looked like, what the calls coming in have looked like.
I'll make sure she gets to respond to that.
Thanks.
Did you have a philosophical?
I did, but I think Director Nardi might need to jump in, so I didn't want to ask that while she's also looking up a specific number.
It's 32.3%. It's just, and that includes the one-time 1.2 million.
Okay, thank you.
But that doesn't include indirects.
Correct. This is just the appropriation.
What a fantastic segue, Mayor, to my next question. And actually, I'm pleased to report that my quick cell phone calculations were correct, that it just was a little lower than I'd expected. So my other question is, I can't remember the reason for not including the indirect costs in each department's budget, and the only reason I'm asking that is because personnel and then, of course, the indirect costs associated with them are the sort of greatest percentages of our budget. So sometimes I wonder if that can present a slightly inaccurate picture of where resources are going, particularly for personnel-heavy departments, whereas other departments are more equipment-heavy.
Point taken. Yeah, I mean, it's just not how we have presented the general fund budget before, and you know, we do go over it in the joint presentation and sort of make that part of it, but we could include more about it in the budget next year. That's a good point. Director Nardi, do you have any thoughts on it?
So indirect costs, especially for the schools, are done and based on actual the year before, or estimated on the year before experience. So for indirects for FY 2024, I will do them in August and I'll present them to the school. They report them to the state in October. But it is based on our experience from 2023, and then that changes. So sometimes I have actually, especially last year, projected higher indirects, and they were actually lowered when we got better student information, and then we actually calculated the actual FTEs for each of the schools, health insurance, who actually took what, actually changed all the numbers. So having them done earlier in the year or in the budget would be misleading, because they do change, and then they're estimated for the fall, and then we get more accurate ones that I send in the spring for the year before. But we do calculate indirects for the enterprise funds, as you'll see in the booklet, and then we do it for the schools. We also do it for Forbes Library, for any of the departments that we support.
Thank you.
Councilor Moulton.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor, and your team for the work you did on this budget. And I concur that it reflects not only your priorities, but priorities that have been supported by the City Council. I wanted to comment on the decision to use the $1.2 million from the Fiscal Stability Fund for the school budget to help close that gap. I support your decision. I think it was a wise decision as we continue to deal with the learning deficit resulting from the pandemic. I think it's been well documented nationally that students are at least a half a year behind. It's disproportionately affected students of color, students from lower income families. So I believe it's critical at this time that we be giving strong and certain support to the schools rather than relying on uncertain budget or revenue sources. So I applaud your decision. My question about that is, what is going to be the impact of taking that $1.2 million on other things? What's the context for that? I think you've identified that the next override will likely have to occur in 2025. Was that moved up from earlier estimates, and are there any other impacts from the use of that $1.2 million?
So every year we sort of have to relook at the Fiscal Stabilization Fund because there are so many factors, including new growth and our other revenue. So sort of the picture that we have right now might be a different picture next year. So right now, when we look at it, we, as you rightly said, we're projecting that we will need to have an override in 25 that would be implemented in FY 26. So that would be 4 years, which is what is, sort of talked about as the minimum for the fiscal stability plan. The previous one, the one that was implemented in 2013, managed to last for 7 years. There were a lot of factors that helped extend that time. Cannabis revenue was one. There was a lot of new growth with Village Hill. There were a lot of things that, there was a very strong economy, a lot of things that really helped that, that time get significantly extended. So particularly with this use right now, even though we are having kind of some strong new growth and our revenue is rebounding, it's looking like we won't make it past 4 years. Again, this is one of the reasons why my team, particularly the folks who do economic development, focus so much on economic development because, as I think I said in the message, the only way that we can meet these ever-growing needs that are more than 2.5% is to pass an override or to have new growth. So that's why we focus on it so much, to try and extend any time between overrides. So we're looking at it, Councilor Moulton, and we will do our best to handle it as responsibly as possible and find the easiest way to kind of implement the next fiscal stability plan. And we're also looking at what the amount will have to be. The previous 2 overrides were for $2.5 million. So that is one of the things that with this significant use of the fund at this point, we are trying to model, what the amount will have to be for the next override for it to then be able to sustain at least 4 years for the next one.
Thank you.
I'll come back to you after Councilor Labarge.
Muted.
Mayor, thank you very, very much for your intense layout of your budget. And I'm proud of you for what you've done. You've worked tirelessly, and I'll keep saying it all the time. Really proud of you as my mayor and the residents here in the city of Northampton. Mayor, what you know, we've been hearing about the Chapter 70 for how long? And it seems like we never get any kind of help from them. Do you know what might be happening here, the pushing of getting more of that Chapter 70 money?
Yes, so, part of this, when I presented the 1.2 million to the school committee, I presented this as a 2-year plan, and one of the other things that was sort of part of this plan was sort of a rallying call that we all as a community, the school committee, city council, everyone in the community really needs to turn their attention towards helping us advocate for more state funding. So, just last week, NACE and some school committee members went to the State House and we're particularly focused on the Fair Share Amendment. So, as I talked about in the message, we had really high hopes for the Fair Share Amendment, and I'm very concerned that it's not going to translate into actual resources for Northampton, and as it's panning out at this moment, really not for very little for K through 12. I'm hoping that will change, but right now it's much more focused on early ed, which of course is very important, and higher ed, which is also very important, but, you know, for us in particular, what we really need is more state revenue for K through 12. So there's a lot, it's really, I've spent countless hours with Senator Comerford on this. It's Chapter 70 formula is really complicated. Our sort of place in this world is complicated for multiple reasons, some of which I covered. So there is, I don't want to, there's a glimmer of hope on the horizon. I don't want to sort of, I don't want to overstate it because I've been a little burned by like any school funding potential, but there's some hope on the horizon that we will, in the next few years, I'm not sure when, start to see some increase in Chapter 70 that actually might be coming from the Student Opportunity Act. So we might be, and this is where it's very complicated, and Senator Comerford does a great job of explaining it, so maybe she could come and talk to all of us about it at some point. But there's some potential that this sort of buffer that we have built up as a minimum aid community, we have something called a hold harmless buffer, which impacts our ability to get more Chapter 70. So it's helpful in some ways because it ensures that even if our enrollment goes down, we get a minimum of Chapter 70. But then when there are new sources of revenue, it means we don't get the benefit of them. So it's there's some hope that may start to shift in the next few years. But what I think is that we really need a complete overhaul of the formula and the charter reimbursement mitigation formula is just has, I think, been unfair and broken from the very beginning. So, you know, that's, as I said, next year we may see, I imagine we're going to go over into $3 million in charter sending tuition. And we will get reimbursed at the current formula for, you know, maybe $500,000, maybe not even. So that is, imagine what we could do if we had $3 million more to put towards, you know, our public schools. That would be revolutionary for us. So
another issue too, another counselor brought up about DPW and the staffing. Also too, which I had talked with the director down in Wisconsin, I think about 2 years now, we've been short of staff there with DPW with staffing. I also told her I have a resident on Cardinal Way who's an executive in another city, the same problem as ours. And even with us going up on the salaries, same with this other city, they just can't get the staffing. It's become like a big problem here in Massachusetts of people getting out and going to work. I mean, how much higher can we go up on the salaries? Another issue I have is 2 weeks ago, and I was with another counselor before city council, and Mayor, we extended the hours on our meter staff going around to what, 8 o'clock at night? I can't tell you how many stores we tried to get a cup of coffee, meet another counselor to go to city council meeting. And how many stores were actually closed at 6 o'clock? So we're paying for meter people up until 8 o'clock. There was hardly nothing down there except for a couple of the Chinese restaurants, and Highbrow was open. I saw Bob McGovern and told him we were having a problem to get a cup of coffee, and he offered it for the other counselor and I to make us a free pot. We said, don't bother, we got bottled water, we're all set with that. But I'm very concerned here. We're trying to save money, and here we have hours changed. Are we hoping that we'll see an increase here. Otherwise, I don't know how many staff are used on a Thursday night or even during the week period, 5 or 6 days a week. Are we gaining or are we losing money?
So, so first we shifted hours. So we're starting enforcement later.
Okay.
And so, so that's one thing. It's a shift, not just an increase.
Okay.
And you know, one of the things we were trying to respond to are the restaurants who had really struggled with having enough turnover and of parking for their sort of evening rush. So, you know, a lot of the cafes might not be open. That's true. But for the restaurants, that's their busy time. You know, some of them don't open till, some of them are open at lunch and some don't open till 5. So that's when they have, you know, they would like people to be able to come and park. So, you know, that we have to see what the parking revenue looks like with this change. You know, as I've said many times, this wasn't meant to be about increasing revenue. You know, obviously we don't want to lose money or lose revenue, but this is really about trying to help our businesses and sort of, you know, sustain them in that way. So, so yeah, I hope that answered your question.
At some point, for a finance committee meeting, maybe could we just have a little breakdown here of, since we have made that change, has the parking money increased somewhat?
Yeah, well, Director Nardi, when she does one of her quarterly reports.
That would be fine.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure, you're welcome, thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Maori.
Right. I remembered my question. It was when you were talking about the school choice fund. I'm just wondering, it seems like it's essentially acting like a stabilization fund for education, and I was wondering if there's any value in having a dedicated stabilization fund for education, or maybe more targeted for special education or larger costs.
You know, that's certainly, clearly you've been talking to some school committee members who've been mentioning that.
I've had those conversations, yes.
What's that? Yeah.
Yeah, we've had those conversations, especially around when we were talking about special ed costs specifically, and how, because they're kind of like, you know, they're actually a little unstable, meaning they're, you know, you can suddenly have these pretty astronomical costs. And so maybe a stabilization fund would help pad that impact.
You know, that's certainly something that the school committee could consider. And, you know, I think that they should build up their reserves to be able to be nimble in situations like that. You know, on the city side, what a stabilization fund that we created would be something that the city council would have to administer, right? Or it would have to go to the city council for an appropriation. So that seems murky to me, that, you know, the city council would then be in charge of something for the schools, where, you know, the schools, we pass a budget and we allocate funds, and then they have autonomy over how they use those funds. So that's
perhaps
sort of,
right. Maybe some of the indirect costs that aren't part of the school budget would be more appropriate then, but we can unpack that more on on Tuesday when Wednesday. Wednesday when we talk about the Northampton Public Schools budget in general. Because, yeah, you could maybe, the ones that were not in the direct costs in the school budget, perhaps. Like we were just talking about, what's the overall money we are spending on the schools versus the school budget, and meaning capital, you know, everything that goes into running our schools. but.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I totally follow you, but,
Yeah. All right, well, I'm going to hold off on more questions until that day, but yes, and thank you. I find this, the budget statement to be a great reference tool. There's actually a lot of, there so that we don't have to go through the budget book, but the budget book is actually rather streamlined as well. It was just, there used to be a little, I can tell, I have them lined up in my room and I can see the difference in.
we try and make it as digestible as possible and just clear and easy.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other counselors? Counselor Gore.
Thank you. Thanks for this presentation and this budget book. It's pretty clear for me, and I just had a question about the 1.2 million that's going to the NPS. I wonder, does that balance the budget for this year, or and what is the plan? What is, like, could you go into detail about the 2-year plan, or maybe that's a question for the Wednesday conversation?
Yeah, so the interim superintendent could go more into detail on her budget, but yes, like our budget, their budget has to be. They need to present a balanced budget. So with that 1.2 million and the cuts that they made and other, all that went into creating their budget and making it work, that gave them a balanced budget for this year, and then for next year, there will need to be additional cuts to then, so the fiscal stability plan, as I said before, was created on the idea that, as sort of like a promise that we give the schools a 4% increase. So 4% is, of course, larger than 2.5%, which is what we can raise property tax by every year without an override. So it's more than necessarily what we're gonna raise, but then you bring in all of the other factors. To maintain that 4% next year, so with a guarantee of 4% next year, there still is going to be a deficit. So there will need to be additional cuts to be able to balance from what will be appropriated next year. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Counselor Labarge.
Mayor, another thing too in your budget that you have with the director, Ken Park, I'm really impressed with what is written here. She deserves a lot of credit because when we had interviewed her, the concern was how many people had left and how she was going to go and call and get people to come back. And when you look at the 200 new members plus 151 returning members, that is unbelievable. And I'm really, really happy seeing this. So it's telling you something here that what she said to us was the facts. She was going to work very tirelessly to get the people who had left to come back, and she's got 151. And I just talked with some last week who are very, very happy versus what I heard 2 years ago. They're really happy with the new director. I just wanted to let you know that.
Thank you. I'm glad that you are hearing what we are hearing, which is why I really wanted to highlight it in the budget, that Director Park is hitting it out of the park. So lame. We're just really pleased with the numbers, obviously, but also just the what we're hearing from folks and that sense of welcoming and warmth that they're experiencing there. So
And that is so important, very important.
Mayor, I suggest you use pickleball references since we're in Northampton and.
Don't cry.
Counselors. Okay. Mayor, I just want to say, this is really impressive, and there's one paragraph in there that really stands out for me, which has to do with the expanding desires of the people of Northampton for more services. You know, the CAPA and the Division of Community Care, that, you know, that people aren't asking for less, and we keep trying to do more with these very limited funding streams. And I just appreciate all of the detail that time and work you put into the details here. And but it's pasting together there's no big pockets of money out there that you're finding that are like, oh my gosh, I can make all of this stuff magically happen. And that it's a lot of hard decisions by you and administrators. So I really appreciate that. And I look forward to meeting with you and the administrators next week to discuss all of this in more detail. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so any other questions, counselors? All right. So I'm now going to suggest that we move to these budgetary orders. So these are items B through G. And two of these items, Counselor Jarrett is going to need to recuse himself. And so depending on which, why don't we start with the ones that you would need to recuse yourself on in terms of referral, because that's the next piece for these, that these are financial orders. I don't think we want to send them to the consent agenda of our next meeting. I think we want to send these to finance, and that finance, after, at the end of the hearings next week, will deliberate and consider a recommendation for how council should proceed at our next meeting. So, but that's my opinion on a referral. But, so, why don't we, Counselor Jarrett, let's take item B and item, let's see, which is it? Solid waste, item E. And I think that I'd like council to discuss referring, whether or not we want to refer those to finance. And then, Counselor Jarrett, you can make your statement and recuse yourself from that deliberation.
Yeah, so I've already made my statement about the general fund. So for the solid waste statement, as a member of the Pedal People Cooperative, I have a financial interest in the decisions that are made regarding the Locust Street Transfer Center, which is part of the solid waste enterprise fund. So it's larger than the average person would. So I'll be recusing myself for that item.
Okay, thank you. And
I move a referral of items B and E to the consent, to the Finance Committee.
Second.
That would be way too expedient.
okay, so motion made by Counselor Foster, seconded by, let's give it to,
Well,
Elkins. Seconded by Elkins. And any discussion on referral to finance for, I'll read these. 23.316, in order to approve the FY 2024 general fund budget, and item 23.319, in order to approve fiscal year 2024 solid waste enterprise fund budget. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please, Laura.
Counselor Perry.
Yes.
Counselor Elkins.
Yes.
Counselor Foster.
Yes.
Counselor Gore.
Yes.
Counselor Labarge,
Yes.
Counselor Maori,
Yes.
Counselor Moulton,
Yes.
and Counselor Nash.
Yes. Okay, those items have been referred to Finance, and they'll be dealing with those next week for the hearings. And I would now like to welcome back Counselor Jarrett to join me for these other financial orders. Okay, so
Wave every time.
so other items related to the budget are C, D, F, and G.
And move to refer those to the Finance Committee.
Second.
Okay, motion made by Counselor Elkins, seconded by Counselor Perry to move, to send those items. Do you have them, Laura?
Yes.
Okay, I don't have to repeat them. To Finance next week. Any discussion? Hearing none. Laura, roll call, please.
Counselor Elkins,
Yes.
Counselor Foster,
Yes.
Counselor Gore,
Yes.
Counselor Jarrett,
Yes.
Counselor Labarge,
Yes.
Counselor Maori,
Yes.
Counselor Moulton.
Yes.
Counselor Nash,
Yes.
and Counselor Perry.
Yes.
Okay, those items have been moved to, they'll be at Finance next week at the end of those budget hearings. Let's go back up to the top here and get this last order done. This is item 23.315, in order to approve FY 2023 budgetary transfers. Director Nardi, you're in the room, and if we get this done, I think you might be done for tonight.
Thank you. So before you is an order to cover some overexpended accounts. The first two rows, we are taking money from the DPW admin and engineer salaries to cover DPW repair and maintenance buildings line. If you remember, there were funds appropriated for making ventilation improvements at the DPW building. In conjunction with that project, they addressed mold and mildew issues by removing the carpet and replacing it with vinyl tile to give the building a small but much needed facelift. So that overspent that line by that $3,000. The next two rows in the chart there is to cover snow and ice. We are taking money from the highway salaries budget, $62,941, and putting it towards snow and ice overtime salaries. And then the next two rows, we are then taking money from the DPW Forest Parks and Cemeteries salaries, $44,077, and putting it towards snow removal supplies. As you know, the $500,000 budget line for snow and ice can easily be overspent depending on what type of winter we have. This year we were actually doing quite well until we had multiple back-to-back snowstorms. In particular, the one that brought 9 inches of heavy, wet snow, bringing down about 100 trees within the city. That required Director LaScalia to hire contractors that worked over several weeks to clean up those trees and remove them. So that's what those funds are, is for the deficit of snow and ice. And that should be final. There's no more expenditures coming out. The final two rows you have there is we are taking $20,000 from free cash, and we are using it to cover contract inspections and services. The department has engaged a contractor to cover for an employee on an approved leave. This line is already overspent because of that approved leave, which was unexpected, and we will be using contracted services for the remainder of the year.
Okay. Councilors, any questions?
Moved.
Councilor Moulton.
Thank you. Director Nardi, so is the money that's being transferred from the salary account the result of the vacancies that we've previously discussed tonight?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
That's what I was going to say.
I'd move to refer to the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion made by Counselor Elkins, seconded by Counselor Jarrett to put this on the consent agenda at our next meeting. Any discussion on that? Hearing none. Laura, roll call, please.
Counselor Foster,
Yes.
Counselor Gore,
Yes.
Counselor Jarrett,
Yes.
Counselor Labarge,
Yes.
Counselor Maori,
Yes.
Counselor Moulton,
Yes.
Counselor Nash,
Yes.
Counselor Perry,
Yes.
and Counselor Elkins.
Yes.
Okay, this item, these budget transfers will appear. Item 23.315 will appear on the consent agenda at our next meeting. And so, next up, we're going to have the elected officials Compensation Advisory Board present to us. I'm going to suggest a 5-minute break while these guys get set up, and then we'll hear from these folks who've been really patient.
I think they'd like to wait a little longer.
Yeah,
Is
then
there
we can
anything
do
else we
that.
could put in front?
Only 4 or 7.
We're lonely, okay?
So we will reconvene at, let's make it 9:11.
Well, they're getting the firsthand experience.
Yeah, exactly.
is he?
I'm in the Zoom, and I'm here.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. We're in the process of figuring out whether the chair of the committee, the compensation committee, is part of the Zoom. Laura, is John going to be able to share his screen?
We're seeing it.
He's sharing it now.
Sharing it right now.
Oh, look at that! I thought I pulled it up by accident. All right, there we go. Okay, so we have John Bidwell with the Elected Officials Compensation Advisory Board, and they've we pulled them together back in November, and they've been meeting and pulling together data, and they recently submitted a report to us. They had a timeline to get information to us so we could figure out whether we wanted to act on their recommendations to possibly increase salary, the compensation for elected officials here in Northampton. And they've moved pretty quickly, and council is going to need to move pretty quickly as well. And they are here tonight to present. I just want to say that council, if anything that we are going to act on, needs to be done by June 30th. It needs to happen within the first 18 months of our terms. If we don't do anything, then we're giving up our shot at considering changing the compensation. So just putting it out there, we have a timeline, but I'm really looking forward to hearing what you guys have to say. And John, are you ready to go?
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
So thank you, John. And we also have other members here. So we have John Bidwell, we have Deb Henson, we have Javier Luengo Garrido, and we have Sam Hopper. And who else? There was other members?
We did. We have three others that aren't here. Tara Brewster, Felicia Corbile, and Peter Whale. It was an excellent committee, I have to say, in many, many ways. Probably in all ways. Yeah.
You have the floor.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you inviting us here. The presentation you're going to be seeing is really a synopsis of the entire report. So if there's any details, please dig into the report. And obviously, if you have any questions, chime in, either while we're going along or afterwards. This is the advisory board. It looks like there's a lag time on your screen.
That could be.
The internet's a little slow.
Is it? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's a little discrepancy. So anyhow, the advisory board. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start reading through this. Yeah. You all have received a copy of this, right? Mm-hmm. So I will go through the pages, but I may end up getting a little ahead just to keep things moving. Excellent. Okay. So the background on this is that yes.
So you have full screen. That's not full screen, so it's not the same.
Yeah, I don't know which screen that is, but that's not.
Yeah.
Oh, that may not. Really?
Is that my screen?
Oh, okay. Hold on. There we go. Very interesting. All right, we're on track. Okay, thanks, Javier. That's why they're here. One of the many reasons they're here. All right, advisory board. You get to see who we are. We've gone through the names. Background: the Elected Officials Compensation Advisory Board, the board, was created by the City Council in accordance with Section 5.5 of the Administration Code. The board was tasked with reviewing, quote, the adequacy and equity of compensation benefits and expense allowances of the municipal elected officials and reporting its findings and recommendations to the mayor and to you, City Council. Process: we started meeting, although we were called together in December, we actually started meeting in January, and we ended the meetings in May. We benchmarked against 6 cities. Those are all outlined at the end in the addendum of the plan. And we received input from elected officials through a survey, interviews, and Q&As. We deliberated the adequacy of current salaries and stipends, how to attract qualified candidates, how to attract candidates with diverse backgrounds and talents, how to encourage a diverse candidate pool that fairly represents the diversity of the city's population, and how to improve the compensation review process itself. Considerations. 1, increasing diversity. Northampton lacks historic demographic data to this in terms of who has served on the council and who has served in the city, but appears to follow the national norm for elected officials who are white and identify as female. The board assumed that, 1, as a representational governing body, the city of Northampton must strive to be a model for diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. That is not stated, as far as we know, explicitly by the city, but it was an assumption made on behalf of the board. We also assumed that encouraging a fair elected representation of the city's diversity, especially underserved communities that traditionally have not been well represented and historically have been denied equity, is most beneficial to the city as a whole. And elected officials who communicated with the board expressed their belief that low compensation may be a deterrent to residents running for elected positions. So encouraging elected diversity means recognizing that not everybody has the time and means to meet these heavy demands. Some of the discussion that we had with this had to do with the fact that traditionally a lot of times the people who are able to give back to the city in the positions such as yours are people who can supplement that with other income, either have spouses who have income or they themselves have income. But if we're really going to encourage the diversity that's needed truly across the city that represents the city itself, we can't assume that everybody comes into this position with that type of compensation already in their pocket. So one of the reasons we wanted to look at the compensation was as a way to encourage the diversity that wouldn't otherwise be encouraged. We also took a look at the health insurance and retirement benefits. In general, the assumption is that offering benefits is already beneficial to attracting a diverse candidate pool. That's one thing that's great. It's in place. It's working. Appears to be. Elected officials shared their belief that benefits are the greatest tool to increase the diversity of people serving the city. Increasing sorry about that, I'm going the wrong way. Recommendations. 1, the mayor's salary. Currently it's at $92,500. We are recommending $130,000. Why? Rationale. 1, this is a working mayor's position. It's a full-time position with rigorous work demands that preclude outside employment. What we've seen not only with the current mayor, but with the previous mayors has been an increase in the amount of time that's required on behalf of the mayor, essentially in position 24/7. Average work week, and the average work week equals the official duties that happen, the ceremonial duties, the committee work, events, public forums, and regional and state meetings and functions. In addition to all that, we have social media. We have a lot of channels that are opening up with communications that are really making it more accessible, meaning the community is more accessible to the mayor and the mayor is more accessible to the community, and as a result, expectations have gone up, and so has the amount of time that's required for the position. The last time that this was looked at, which is 2014, the estimate was 60 to 80 hours a week on behalf of the mayor that was required, and we don't see any change with that right now. Further considerations is that the current salary ranks 98th in city salaries, 98th. In 2014, it was ranked 64th. At that time, one of the recommendations was that it needs to be improved. Instead, it actually lost its place in the city's ranking. $130,000 would rank the mayor's salary 16th, according to the FY22 city salaries. Other things that we looked at were the average mayoral salaries for the 6 benchmark cities and towns, which came in at $102,700. And we also needed to note that taking time off on behalf of the mayor is very difficult. Yes, in theory, there are those who can step in emergencies, and there are staff who can help, but the truth of the matter is, with being on job 24/7, the reality of actually taking any downtime, any leisure time, any rest time is becoming more and more difficult. 2, city councilor salaries. Ward councilor was at $9,000, at large $9,500, council president $10,000. Based on the information that we got in terms of the amount of time spent, we took the ward counselors and at-large counselors' times, and we said it was roughly the same amount of time, which is how we arrived at the $16,931.20. And for the council president, would take that from $10,000 up to $21,164. Rationale. In getting information back from the council and from others, we found, we made the estimate that it's 20 hours a week on behalf of the amount of time that you put in. It may be more, it might be less in certain weeks, but looking at what the average would be. And then we took that and we multiplied it by an individual's living wage. Living wages are information that's provided by MIT. And we looked at living wage as defined by 1 adult and 0 children. If you go to the living wage page, you'll find that there are different levels of what's considered a living wage, whether it's for an individual, whether it's for a couple, whether it's for a family. We took a rather conservative approach to it, to be honest. We could have taken a much higher approach. I think it's a little unfair to assume that anyone who comes into this position does not have a partner or may not have kids. But nonetheless, considering the jump that we were already looking at, we took a conservative approach. But even then, we still arrived at pricing, or at salaries, salary that's roughly double of what's being paid right now. School committee salaries. Those positions for ward member and at large, which are $5,000 and $5,500, both arrive again at that $9,312.16. We took the same calculation that we had used for your positions, and we had multiplied it by 55% because that's currently what they're getting. They're getting 55% of what yours are. Trustees of Smith salaries, same deal. We looked at how we calculated the council's compensation, and we multiplied it by 55% because that's the current percentage that they are getting paid relative to what you're getting paid or compensated for. In terms of the benefits, because of the opinion that this is something that's very advantageous already to employees, to elected officials, and to people who may be looking at the positions, we recommend keeping them the same. And then in addition to this, we also looked at the process itself. So to really do this process correctly, there are 4 stages to it. The first stage is really understanding how the process works. All of you know this because as you become elected officials, you have to understand what's going on in the open meeting laws. You have to understand how to do things correctly so that you don't trip over your feet and having to do things over again. So there's a learning process that's involved for all of us. We were very lucky that there were some people on the board who had this experience, so we could draw on that experience. But I don't think you can always assume that someone on the board is going to have that. That's phase 1. Phase 2 is gathering the research. Gathering the research is time intensive. It's not necessarily what we all do day to day. So it really requires a lot of effort to have that come in. The third stage is deliberation. That's really the key to all of this, right? That's really what you're asking the board to do. You're asking the board to deliberate. You can't deliberate until we have the information and we understand how the process works. Fourth phase is when we're reporting out. So one of the things that we have found as a board is that it's a pretty, even though it's a relatively short period, it's a laborious period. And I think that's one of the reasons that you're not seeing this happen once every 8 unless you're looking at once every 8 to 10 years. Frankly, I think that's unfair to be assessing in a position like yours every 8 to 10 years. My guess is that most people in their job positions wouldn't tolerate waiting that long to have their jobs reevaluated. I don't think it should be any different. We don't think it should be any different for people in your position or any elected official in the city. So one of the first things that we'd like to do is recommend a 2% COLA, cost of living adjustment, beginning in 2025 in the years that the compensation board does not convene. That at least makes sure that things are moving along as a default. Otherwise, what you do is you get yourself into the situation we're in right now, where suddenly you're 8 years behind, you're making adjustments that are huge, and people go, what the heck, why is that so big? And the truth of the matter is, it's actually not that big relative to not only bringing people in, to diversify the type of people attracted to the job, but also just to keep up with what the expenses are. Rationale is the board meets infrequently, as I just stated. Most jobs are reviewed annually, and COLA consideration is common in the state of Massachusetts. This isn't anything radical. The other is a more efficient review process. So I laid out the 4 phases to you. It would be great if in phase 2, which is the research, that the city provides compensation data rather than relying on the board to do that. It took us, that was the piece that took the most time, and it really meant that the time that we could deliberate these things was shortened. And that's really the piece that we should be putting most of our time and energy into. The other thing that would help with that is if the city could at least advocate for the Massachusetts Municipality Association to manage up-to-date compensation information. That did not happen during COVID. We get it. During COVID, a lot of things didn't happen, but we would hope at this point that they would get back on board and that that information would be more readily available. Also, we would recommend that future compensation boards invite the previous board back early on, as early as possible, to explain what they're getting into and to explain the process to help them along so that they can get on board more quickly and more efficiently. And that's the overview. Questions?
Well, I just want to say thank you, you guys. I really appreciate this.
Yeah, well,
And-
there's just no way. I'm really serious. This board was fantastic. You couldn't have asked for a better group of people. Came from different parts of the city, different backgrounds, different talents. Everybody carried water, and it was a fantastic experience in that respect. Plus, I got to meet some great people.
Councilor Maori.
Yeah, I'm just really impressed with the thoughtfulness and, really kind of, as you say, there isn't all this baseline, and you're creating baseline, and that's a lot of work. And I just felt this real sense of, wanting to, to pursue fairness, and I was really impressed with that. So I was at one of the later meetings on that Monday, one of the last meetings, and it felt like there was this shift, and I'm just curious about that. I'd love for you all to comment on that shift that happened and your thought process around that later in the, as you were wrapping up.
I think you're referring to the shift from COLA to...
Microphone.
Oh.
Otherwise, people at home
And
can't
also,
hear.
can you stop sharing your screen?
Yeah.
And then,
Oh, right, because then you can see.
excellent. Thank you, John.
Okay. I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to, but I think it may be when we switched the argument more from COLA to the cost of living.
Yeah, and the idea of like the living wage and
Right.
and our kind of discussion about values and the living wage. I thought that was really fascinating.
Yeah, so originally we had relied heavily on just the cost of living adjustment. So the cost of living adjustment in the time period roughly between in 2014, when the board last made its recommendations, and now, it was a 27% increase. And so we were originally basing it on a 27% increase. However, some people on the board brought up the fact that that's just keeping up with the Joneses, as it were. That's just keeping up with what it was in 2014. That's not actually recognizing, A, the amount of time that's required to do your job and how that's increased, much less what might be required to bring in a more diverse population and cohort that would be interested in these positions. So rather than having it rest on the COLA, we changed the assumptions going into it, and we looked at the living wage.
Councilor Elkins.
Yes, I want to echo the thanks to everybody who worked on this. It's incredibly hard work, and it's a difficult thing to look at and to be nuanced about, and you guys did a great job. I very much support looking at the living wage aspect of it. I'm in my other life, in my career, I am a court-appointed attorney. And we went through or I do court-appointed work, I should say, and we've gone through a few extended periods of time where our rates were not raised at the state level. And what begins to happen, it's not just that folks who can't otherwise do it, folks have to. They're covering more of the overhead of doing the job in that particular role. The overhead of doing the job, they are. It gets to a point where it is so lopsided that, in fact, the constitutional obligation in that case is actually being subsidized by the individual attorneys who are doing that. So it's incredibly important that we don't look at this as it's not a gift for the service. It's not a thank you for the service. It is literally the thing that allows people to be able to do it, and it's also unconscionable to ask people to, in effect, subsidize the civic process, and to have that burden fall particularly on those who step up to serve. And I'm grateful to be in a position. I'm not, I'm not in a woe is me, I'm not in a position where I'm acutely affected by that, but when you start looking at the math and how it works, the only fair way, an equitable way to do it is to really meaningfully think about what a fair compensation is. So I appreciate that change. The other question that I had, and this was just, you noted the mayor's salary ranked 98th in city salaries. I assume that's Massachusetts cities?
98th? No, that's within the city of Northampton in terms of paid salaries.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, never mind. That's my question. That wasn't clear to me, but
Okay.
that's,
Yes, right. It's more clear in the report. I just had to
Okay.
kind of boil it down for the presentation.
okay, thank you.
And to your earlier point, in terms of subsidizing, the parallel is there. There's no doubt about it with relative to what you're saying. I think it's important to recognize with subsidizing the types of positions you're in, I don't want to take away from it. It's a wonderful thing that you're giving back to the community, people who can literally afford to do that. I think it's important to recognize, though, that subsidizing to some degree is a privilege. You know, it's a privilege to be able to do that, and that's not a privilege that everybody has.
Councilor Labarge and then Councilor Jarrett.
John, I want to thank you and the other 6 members for working tirelessly on this. As a city councilor for quite a long time, which I did that survey for you, I'm looking at 20 hours a week as a city councilor. That I have a problem with, because I have put in sometimes many hours as a city councilor, so I'd like to know where you're getting just this 20 hours.
Yeah, so that comes from the survey information. So at the end of the report, you'll see the survey results, and they do vary quite a bit in terms of the responses that we got. But if you look at the average, it really falls in the 15 to 20 hour range. So that was the assumption that we made based on those.
Well, then I guess I can cut my hours down and go.
I don't know, you might deserve some extra
I
cookies
could
from
have you come
Jim.
out in Ward 6 and see how many hours you would put into it.
Yeah.
It depends on the counselor themselves. We're very, very busy counselors with the meetings and so forth like that. And it's just not the meetings. It's the obligation we have for people, the entire city of Northampton and our wards. It's a lot of work. I also, which I've even talked with Jim Nash about it, I feel funny, hopefully someday we'll change the charter, about okaying our pay raise. I have to say I agree about the mayor's pay raise. I've always said it was a low number figure for a mayor who works tirelessly, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I wouldn't mind doing whoever the mayor is, but when I'm saying yes, yes for this increase and so forth, I feel funny inside saying, yes, I want to vote on it, but it is what it is, and hopefully someday we'll change it. Maybe it'll go to Human Resource or wherever for let them to make a decision on voting on it. But anyways, I want to thank you all for all the research that you have done, and I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. You're welcome.
Councilor Jarrett.
One of the considerations that I remember hearing when I attended one of your meetings is that you weren't supposed to take city budget considerations into account, and that you were supposed to look at, well, what would be the appropriate amount to pay, and now we will take budget considerations into account. Is that correct?
That's correct. I mean, that's true, but I'll be honest with you. I think in the back of all our minds, a lot of us come from positions where we don't throw money around, right? So I think we do in some ways. It does come through in some ways. Some people were better at setting that aside than others on the board, I think. But a good example of that, for instance, is the fact that when we looked at the living wage, we looked at the most conservative of the numbers in the living wage. We could easily, frankly, have chosen a number that was higher, but it would have taken all of these figures and doubled them at least. And tripled. So yes, technically we were not supposed to take into account, but I think based on a lot of the individuals and our experience with other organizations, it's going to seep in.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilor Moulton and Councilor Foster.
Thank you. Thank you, committee, for the work that you did. It's very thoughtful and very comprehensive. A question I have is, one of the drivers is increasing diversity, and properly so. And I believe intuitively that part of that, a tool for increasing diversity, is the overall compensation, including pay and benefits. I wondered if you've had come across any data that backs that up, either in the peer communities that you have benchmarked Northampton against, or that MMA has collected, where higher compensation does lead to more diversity.
Yeah, that's, there's a paucity of data to some degree, because all of this, these are new considerations, right? I think as a society, this is a new value, this is something that we're beginning to really recognize en masse. It's not something that has a long history, so there's not, frankly, a lot of data out there. There is some data out there to point in that direction without a doubt, maybe not as much as we'd like, but that's typical in a situation like this, I think, as we're venturing into new directions. But I'd also ask if there's anyone else on the board that can speak to that point.
I would be able to speak about that. I need to be recognized for now.
You guys are providing a report. Feel free to...
Yeah, just use the microphone.
So we need to be careful with this, right? Because one of the presumptions that we did at the beginning was to contrast Northampton with the surrounding cities. That was a huge mistake, because if you take a look to the surrounding cities, elected officials are grossly underpaid. If you take a look to the report, you're going to find Greenfield with $4,000, $2,000. That's one thing, right? But what we're seeing across the board is that the predominant representation is white, sort of middle-aged white people, right? Vastly, right? And in relation to adding diversity and inclusion into the recommendation, it played out in an interesting way, which was what Councilor Mayori was talking about the Monday meeting, that also Councilor Jarrett and Councilor Gore were present. That meeting, we were supposed to vote salaries, and with the salary that we were thinking at that point for City Council was $11,500, more or less. $11,500, it's the equivalent of 9,000 and change from 2014, 2016. So that recommendation under no circumstances was going to sort of survive, having in mind that if you take a look to the report, the first 2 pages talk about adding diversity and including monetary compensation to the consideration of people being able to run or not, right? The main discussion of that was, because what I want to make clear here, and this is more than anything for the record, 16,900, whatever it is right now, it's for one single person, with not cursed with children, right? That's a joke, but right. So by no means, and I want to be really clear with this, by no means $16,000 in the way 1,600 and 900, how it's recommended right now, it's, you know, the debate went to say that it's pretty baseline. And one of the things that I personally was a little disappointed is that I was cognizant that whatever recommendation this board made to the mayor and the city council was going to be the ceiling. Sadly, we're giving you a pretty low ceiling. And I think the community needs to be aware. You know, I work for the ACLU of Massachusetts, right? And my field of expertise is municipal work and lobby with elected officials. I know how much elected officials work. I know how much they work. 20 hours, you know, it's almost like a restaurant. Some weeks it's going to be 30 hours. Some weeks it's going to be 20. Sometimes it's going to be 15. But the average is really high. And if, as John said, if you don't have a person supporting you, somebody, your wife making money, or you are not coming from a family of money, or retire with a good pension, it's not an option. I mean, there is a reason, thank God now we have Councilor Perry, Councilor Gore, and before Councilor JT, right? I'm still waiting my lifetime to see a Latino council member in Northampton. Hopefully, if you're able to advocate for these recommendations, and I would encourage you to advocate for the ceiling that we're giving you, because going lower would be a bad idea.
Thank you.
And that answered your question? Okay. Next up, Councilor Foster.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll just express again my gratitude and thanks for all of your work. Councilor Lavarge, to your point, our culture is so funny about money, isn't it? It's often an uncomfortable topic, and I think that in particular in public service and human services, that keeps wages significantly lower than in the private sector. And in part of that, to John Bidwell's point, I've been managing a nonprofit budget for the last 17 years, and I know what that's like to look at a salary line and think, what could that be in programs? Or, that those are the games and the chess pieces we're playing, and that's the chess game we're playing with the city budget. But what that does is it means that people who work in public service, and council is like a little squishy. I don't know that I would call being an elected official at this level a job, but it's a huge responsibility, and it's a public service, and there's compensation that needs to happen for that. And that sort of chess game that we're all playing with budgets keeps that low. And this conversation, how, to be perfectly honest, how this kind of conversation is going to play out maybe in the press and among constituents is going to be, depending on where we go and what we look at within ordinances. They voted themselves a huge pay raise. But to your point, there hasn't been a cost of living adjustment since 2014. And I'm also going to have a little confession here that the meeting I attended was earlier in your process. And what is the word I'm looking for? It's not skeptical, but I was I was cynical. I was feeling cynical, not about you all, but about the way these kinds of processes go, which is, and this is true of the schools and of so many jobs, of let's look around to similar communities and what are they paying, and let's get somewhere in the average of that. And that's one way to do it, but it's not a way to be transformative or to be a leader. And so I recognize the critique, from Peter Whalen, who took the time to write a separate opinion, and I appreciate that he did that. And this is a higher recommendation than surrounding similar communities. And yet, if we are going to increase the diversity and make it more sustainable for people to serve in these positions, then it's actually incumbent on us to be leaders in that role. And, I think one of the things, as you were talking about as well, that's really relevant is being a counselor doesn't fit neatly into, I'm going to work on city council things from 8 to 10 this morning and then come to a meeting tonight. It's sort of like you're sitting at a picture window and there's birds flying in kind of all the time. And one of the things that makes, right? Something's hitting the window. But what that does is it means people who are working 9-to-5 jobs are either unable to respond to the pace that things are coming in at council, or they're not able to commit the mental and emotional energy to this work that people who are not working 9-to-5 jobs are doing. And so, the thinking about it being a stipend to cover, sort of childcare for evening meetings or something, it doesn't fit the flow of how this works. And it's actually tremendously interruptive to a day, like a regular salaried day job. So I appreciate you sort of taking all of those things into consideration. I just wanted to, express appreciation for you looking at that.
Great. So is your cynicism gone? No.
No, you know what? Yes. Thank you. Just that you looked at it beyond what are counselors in Westfield making, and let's meet in the average, but that you actually looked for how can we reach the goals and the values that we've articulated as a city, and taking steps and recommendations to move toward those. So in that way, yes, that has etched through some cynicism. Yeah.
Councilor Labarge, did I see your hand raised earlier?
Not yet.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Councilor Maori.
Yeah, I felt mildly defensive in the beginning because, there's something a little isolated about how we do our work, and it's hard to know if it's translating and if folks are seeing it. So it was just really gratifying that you did, especially since the pandemic and folks, I feel like in general, the expectation has gone way up. We have a little bit of an older population. They're very engaged. We're really lucky for that. But with that comes with it a greater expectation. And I don't think it's going to go down. We've got a climate emergency. We've got, a recovering school committee, school community recovering from the pandemic. So there's lots of complexity, and I really, I'm glad that you see that. And it's not just, council. I mean, I was thinking about school committee, and if, you were saying about people who identify as women being on these boards and committees, and of course we all know how much uncompensated and really unseen labor women do. So I think especially I'm glad for them too, since I think it's a way of really expressing our values. You said that really well, Councilor Foster. Like, it's not just about like comparing. It's really like we're leaders here. Northampton. That's what Northampton likes to do. And what is our statement? And yeah, I've always thought about the discomfort about talking about money and who benefits from that. And I think it does keep, across the board, keep some salaries down, some time and wage and compensation down. So I think the 2% is a great idea. That just the automatic that really will make the process easier in the future. And yeah, I guess that's all I've got to say about that. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Councilor Perry.
I like that you were looking there and then pointing over.
Well, this way I'm making sure they get Councilor Labarge in the...
It's like a prophet, Well, I too want to thank you guys for your work. And want to kind of echo what a lot of the other councilors were saying about how heartened I was to see that you guys started this process by looking at diversity. And I wanted to say between this advisory board and I had the pleasure of serving on the select committee to study barriers with Javier, as well as Councilor Gore. For me, it really showed this administration and the city's commitment to diversity. It takes a special type of person, I think, to serve in an elected capacity. And there's a lot of factors in that. And I know that looking at compensation won't be the answer to everything, but I think it is a step in the right direction. But I say that to say the one thing that stood out from this report and also from the select committees was the lack of demographics, historic demographic data. And I just wanted to bring that up, and I hope that our city does take a look at that and in the future really focuses on trying to look at what the past numbers were, but also keep good numbers so that people in the future don't have to kind of dig around in the dark to try and find this information. It is going to be very important in the future for our city in the generations to come that we have this data and we can really look to then again and see that we are being the leaders that we hope and propose to be. So thank you guys.
Thanks.
Councilor Gore.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that, I'm glad for you guys' work on this. I really think that it's going to enable more diversity in the city and go after our values and our goals as a city to be more diverse and have a different variety of people on the council that we never had before, hopefully. And it's, I agree with Councilor Foster about, in public service, it's kind of seen as like this is the job that it's kind of like you kind of go into it just wanting the job and not thinking so much about the compensation. But really, all the work that we put into it, I think that it deserves to be compensated in a fair way. And I think you guys did a really good job in looking at that and thinking about fairness and equity and trying to include more people and trying to promote diversity. So I appreciate that.
Thanks. I also really want to, the whole committee, really, the board got behind all this, but there's certain people who really push this harder than others. So I think it's really important to recognize who's here today, because the three of them really pushed this frankly, harder than others. And I just want to make sure that credit goes where it belongs.
Counts. Round of applause. Then Councilor Foster.
Thank you, Councilor President. I got on a roll and forgot one thing I wanted to say. And one of that is, it's public knowledge that I don't intend to run for another term on council. And in discussions in the background about who may choose to run, the perception of public service, and I think the last few years have really done a number on what people perceive it to mean to participate in public service, that people anticipate that it will be a really challenging, all-consuming, thankless experience. And I will say that that is not there are times it's all-consuming. I have my moments where I'm like, what? But overall, that's public service actually has been and can be incredibly rewarding. And yet I think at the same time, generationally, people who are younger, if we're going to be really honest, have it much, much harder than people who are older, in terms of graduating with higher debt, higher housing costs, just looking, our numbers of inflation as we're thinking about that, wages aren't keeping pace. The gig economy, there's all of these things that go into, I think, a very quaint idea that, has taken hold with public service of people can do this 100% to give back. And yet the reality, in particular of people who are younger, is that's no longer their reality. If they're, working multiple gig jobs, that the idea of that altruistic giving back, there may be that desire for it, but there's not the reality for it. So I just wanted to make sure I said that in the context of what you're proposing.
Councilor Labarge.
Thank you. Chevalier, there's one question that I'm really concerned about on the report. Here we do have a single parent who has children who would love to come onto city council. I know, I've talked with some. They can't because they can't afford a babysitter. How do we handle a situation like that? They work all day and they have to be with their children when they get out of work and make sure they have their baths and so forth. They cannot afford to hire a babysitter with city council meetings and the subcommittees and that. How do we somehow are able to go ahead and accommodate a single parent or even working parents? Some of them are working 2 jobs. I don't know, can you answer that, Jen?
I was hoping it was rhetorical.
Somebody on the committee.
I don't. That is the $64,000 question for so many people.
It is a biggie.
It's huge. I work with a lot of nonprofits up and down the valley. I know the strain and stresses, in particular with childcare. It is a big, big problem. So I'm not surprised that it's felt here, and boy, do I wish I had an answer for that.
I know. I had to bring that up because I have great concerns about that, especially when we do have residents who would be very interested in running for city council or either even school committee. Yeah. And that there's just that blockade there that they cannot do it. Yeah. And also they're looking at long hours.
And I would add, you can't use campaign funds. You can buy bagels for your campaign team, but you can't. I think that wasn't Rep. Sabadosa was working on that, but anyway, just had to add that gripe.
So Javier, if you could come up to the podium.
Councilor Labarge.
Yes.
Good night. There is an answer for that. And the answer is going to be long-term, but this is the right starting point. If you do not act on this, your concern is you're going to just keep going without even starting a solution. This is a solution, but it's a solution that we do believe is viable, We do believe you can do it. As Councilor Foster said, there are 3 of you that probably are not going to run. That's, make a statement, but also I want to invite the full council to think a little different about this. Raising the salary is not, and I know you're going to hear from community members saying that you are just raising your own salaries, right? But the answer is you're not doing that. You're raising the salary to a position to improve it systemically. God knows if anybody here is going to get reelected. God knows who is going to be here in 6 years, right?
Right.
So I do think, Councilor Labarge, that this council is in a privileged position to be able to start answering your question, because I do think that the answer to your question is owned by this council.
Thank you.
I feel compelled to just add one thing about.
Go ahead, and then I'm going to say
I just was going to say, and part of that, if you look at just kind of the overall stress on a parent as a single parent of 3, it's also about the culture and around serving. And I mean, this is where I've really appreciated this council and this president, who takes very seriously input from parents here, who are serving, about how to, when can we add some flexibility, examples of moving council meetings off of school vacations. I mean, it takes, there's a new culture, and I'm just really impressed with, Vice President Foster and President Nash, and this whole council just kind of really giving us a break when it, understanding sometimes the kind of dance we all have to do around raising children and working. So I think the answer is also culture, part of the culture of serving, and I'm actually really heartened by that.
Councilor Foster.
Oh, sorry, you'll get your turn. But to Councilor Labarge, to your point, I think a nuance that often gets left out in the conversation about childcare is we talk about the cost of childcare, and as you said, if there's a parent who's working all day, coming home, giving their kids baths, and then they have to get a babysitter, can they do it? But part of that, perhaps the culture around service, is this idea that perhaps somebody wouldn't need to work a full-time salaried job in order to offset their own costs of public service. So that's where the compensation, if that becomes something that's closer to viable, that allows somebody to have more, flexibility with their job or how they run things, then it's not this expectation that somebody's on a 40-hour-a-week treadmill and then also adding public service. So it is the cost of childcare, but it's also the cost of the time of that and the time away. So there's a lot of different angles to that target.
Do you want to go? Go ahead.
I'm going to go again. Just in the sake of diversity, because we did look at childcare in the select committee, but I also wanted to state that it's not just people taking care of children. It's also going to be people taking care of elders or relatives who do need care. And it's important to look at that and to also have things in place to allow a more diversity of options in order to participate. So I personally have been benefiting from our ability to be on Zoom. I do work a night job, unlike many people who serve, and I would not have been able to do my duty if it wasn't for the temporary rules in place. And so, as was stated before, this is not the end-all solution, but it is a step. And we also have to be aware of all of the other factors that are limiting people. And it's not just compensation, but it is a good start, and we have to take something. There you go, Council President.
Okay. So, yeah, thank you. So, first of all, Councilor Maori, thank you for those really kind words. One of the things that the diversity, the aspect of diversity that's not very evident on this council is the number of counselors with school-age kids. There's 5 of you, and that's remarkable. that when I started on council, there was one person on council with school-age children, and that is our mayor. And that, and for many years that was the case. That started to change the election prior to the last one, and it continued to change more, where we now have 5 of you. And I think that really, it's really enriched council, and that, you know, when I joined council, that I outside of the mayor, Councilor Scherer at that time, I was the young person. And that, I know, it's funny now, isn't it? But yeah, because many of those folks, we know them well. We see them around town. They've all moved on, and that, but the vitality of service in Northampton depends on younger folks being part of the process, and that having people with school-age kids is evidence of that actually happening. One of the things that I think that these recommendations, the important thing for me is the way they offer stability. I want people to get that that the reason we're interested in seeing these stipends increase is not so nobody's getting rich here. I mean, nobody's getting rich, all right? And but that, you know, by having access to the health insurance, to have a more reasonable level of compensation for the many hours of work, and frankly, you know, there's a lot of sacrifice that goes on in terms of, and it is true of this body of folks, as well as school committee and Smith Voc trustees and our mayor, who, you know, we're going to go home tonight and she's at a conference, and and she'll probably be working on Saturday and Sunday as well. So that yeah. So I think it's important for us to take a really hard look at this, and I know that we're under the gun here, and we're also considering this at a very difficult time. That we are also considering a budget, and a budget that likely is going to involve, you know, asking the people of Northampton for, you know, more to support the budget and the services we provide. And that I like the way that Javier framed this isn't necessarily about us, and for me, it's definitely not about me, because you know, what if we approve any changes, I'm not going to be on council to see any of those, and And the last thing I want to say, what really heartens me is this council is ready to vote. This council, you've all been thinking about this, that this presentation tonight, you know, it's been kicking around for a while, and that this isn't brand new, like, oh, that's interesting, you know, well, maybe we should consider that we've been talking about this with constituents in our campaigns, and that I think that we're ready to act on recommendations, and it makes me smile because I like it when the council is. I see my job as making sure you guys have the information and you're ready to get stuff done, and we have a pretty tight timeline here, and it looks like we're ready to do something. So there's my thoughts. How next do people want to proceed? We have committees, and we have finance is very busy right now. They have a budget. I think that there might be something later that might have city services pretty busy, and but this is an ordinance change, and it's definitely, it needs to go to legislative matters. And I'm wondering if we could, along with that, ask for legislative matters to do the outreach on these particular recommendations and do that public outreach before it comes back to council for us to, make a final decision. That would be my thought.
Doesn't somebody, sorry.
Councilor Jarrett.
Oh, okay. So we're now moving down to the discussion, and the presentation is done.
Yes, exactly.
Should we let them decide if they want to go or stay?
They cannot.
That's right, we were going to go to the...
The doors are locked.
Are there more cookies? Thanks.
What, are you going to leave? I got a cookie.
Take the big bucks.
Thank you. Thank you for all your work.
Thanks, everyone.
For waiting.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was a rhetorical change to the agenda. Yeah, so I warned you this was coming. So now, yes, I'd like to move to the ordinance on the agenda relative to this. Oh, my daughter's calling.
FaceTimer.
So I guess I have a process question.
Yeah, go right ahead.
So we don't have anything on the agenda here. We typically, the way we do things is several counselors, four or fewer, would come up with a proposal and would then put it on the agenda. So should we do that? Should we just discuss until it, we can always discuss a proposal to put on the next agenda here, right? I don't know. So we've never done that. Then we would have something concrete, an ordinance proposal at our 6-1 meeting. We would then refer that to at least legislative matters for 6-12, and then it would come back for 6-15 in time for. So that's I guess the question is, as legislative matters, of course, is obligated and happy to take it, but are there other committees that would want to also take that up between June 1st and June 15th? Actually, June 1st and June 12th, since legislative matters needs to be the last.
So to answer your first question there around having actual legislation, and that Laura and I have talked about it, we actually, so the recommendation from our advisory board has been to change the ordinance. And the actual ordinance it's what is linked into the agenda here. That's the existing ordinance, and that it's up to council as to how we want to amend that ordinance.
But don't we amend it by somebody putting forth legislation to amend it?
So how would you guys like to do that? We have a report. We could put something on the floor next time. Basically, we could take these numbers and put them into a proposed ordinance change format, and we could have those on the table.
I think that's the way it's got to be done. I think somebody needs to, like, just when we do like zoning legislation where we amend the zoning code, that's legislation in and of itself to amend the existing, that's amending, the ordinance. Sorry, my words, they're leaving.
So, Laura, we had that conversation with Attorney Seawald. Do you recall that? And he was recommending that what we were doing is taking essentially the ordinances as they're written and consider amending them.
Yeah, I think he was thinking, since really the primary change is changing the number that's in the ordinance, and there's some textual changes, like to add the 2% COLA and any changes to the process, but he was thinking that it would make the process more open-ended to refer it to legislative matters I guess what we we're going to put on the agenda is the recommendations of the Officials Compensation Advisory Board. Just put those into ordinances and present them, but he was thinking, you know, that was the discussion for the council to have, whether they wanted to use those numbers or some other numbers. So he thought, you know, presenting it as a more open-ended question of just amending that salary schedule would be a way of discussing it too.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Foster, then Councillor Moulton.
So if I understand correctly, what you're suggesting is that we refer the existing ordinance to legislative matters, where it could then be amended and brought back to council. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's it. Yeah. Okay. With the report in hand.
So that we actually do have an ordinance to refer to legislative matters. It's just an old one.
Yes.
Got it.
And we're asking it to be updated. Councillor Mayor.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah, Councillor Moulton,
Thank
sorry.
you. So we're asking legislative matters to update it based on the recommendations that have been sent us by the DEOCB.
Yes.
Okay. Now, which I think makes sense, and then legislative matters will deliberate and send an amended ordinance to the full council on the 15th. But, I mean, it seems to me that the other impact is a financial one, because this will take effect halfway through FY 2024, and it's not reflected in the budget book.
Correct.
There are not, if these increases are approved, those aren't accounted for in the budget book.
Correct. They would go on as, it would be, I spoke to the mayor about this, that we would approve budget transfers, and that the mayor would most likely be taking the funds from reserves for the next year. And then the mayor would, the following year, for FY 2025, would need to figure out a funding source.
Okay.
So that's how that would work.
Direct response, if that's okay, Councilor.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
my question was answered.
Did I lose track? I'm
No,
sorry.
I don't, my question's been answered.
Okay, Councilor Jarrett.
Oh, Laura has some.
I was just going to say, I didn't know if it would be helpful. What we had done is sent Attorney Seawald the package of ordinances that were used the last time to to amend the ordinance, and I could show them to you, and, you know, so he has them already, so, you know, he's prepared. But if you don't mind me screen sharing a minute,
Go right ahead, Laura.
what they looked like last time when this process happened was, like, for the one for elected officials, you know, it's basically a table with, you know, here's what the salary is now, here's what it's proposing to be for each of the different, let's see if I can move to the next council president. There was, I think, 4 different ordinances, and each of the ordinances, one had the mayor's salary, one had the councilors, one had the school committee members, or maybe there were only 3. But so basically it's a table that you're going to plug numbers into. So that would be the form, they're in fairly simple form. I don't know if it's helpful or not, but
That's helpful.
Councilor Elkins.
I guess just my question is do we have to do, I guess what I worry about is that if we just send this to legislative matters without an ordinance to amend on the table, then when do we have first reading of that? And is that going to set us back in front of the timeline? It seems like I mean, it's still an ordinance, so it's legislation, we'd have to do first reading. I suppose we could suspend the rules based, seems backwards.
Oh, yeah.
So I think what Councilor Jarrett outlined, or maybe it was you, Councilor Elkins, that next time we ask Laura to create a document with the ordinance as taking the recommendations, and that is at council next time, and then we refer it to legislative matters, and then we would know specifically what legislative matters is discussing and seeking feedback on, and then that would come back to council by the 15th.
Of
June.
Okay.
So on the first, we discussed that particular, the specific figures referred to LM, that meets on the 8th? 12th. And then it comes back on the 15th to council.
Yeah, okay.
Councilor Foster.
Just a process question.
Yeah.
If we're introducing an ordinance, then it's always upon the recommendation of somebody. So Laura wouldn't be able to do that, but I wonder if perhaps the gentleman to my left, who's the president of the council, may want to introduce something, or, if I'm glad to work with you, or if we may want to think about that, because it would need to be upon somebody's recommendation. And it would make sense to me, appropriately perhaps as council leadership, to do that, but that's just a process question for the group.
I'd be comfortable doing that. Okay. Yeah. Councilor Jarrett.
So I'll just point out a couple more things. One is we can, on June 1st, we could also decide to refer, say, to finance if that was deemed appropriate. So we're not locking ourselves into just legislative matters. Just want to express support for the idea of Councilor Nash. And he can choose to bring in as co-sponsors anyone else that he chooses to come up with the draft language and put it on the agenda on June 1st. And my point from before was I did a calculation of what the budget considerations are if we implement all of the recommendations. So the total annual cost is $161,589.52. And slightly less in some circumstances. But for the next fiscal year, we'd be looking at around $80,000 that would have to be transferred in. So that's the, and we can talk about this more, once we've referred it out and such.
I was going to ask Director Nardi that question, but you answered it all in your, thank you. So, so I will pick a co-sponsor, and we'll bring this to the next council meeting, and we will decide what to do. Okay. All right. Next. Thanks, everybody. All right. All right. Oh, so we are back to the consent agenda. I think things are going to go pretty fast from here on in. All right. So we have the minutes of January 31st, 2023, Joint City Council School Committee, SVAHS, Smith Voc Trustees Meeting, and the April 13th, 2023, and May 3rd, 2023 City Council meetings. We have item 23.251, National Grid poll petition for Pleasant Street. We have 23254, National Grid poll petition for Maple Street. We have 23.255, National Grid poll petition for South Street. We have 23.308, in order to reprogram funds to NPS Playground account. 23.309, in order to accept D.A. Sullivan $10,000 gift for public art and economic development project. 23.310, in order to appropriate CPA funds for Smith Charities Phase 2 Rehabilitation Project. In order, we have 23.311, in order to appropriate CPA funds to Historic Northampton for collections Preservation Project. Item 23.312, in order to appropriate CPA funds for Forbes Library Restoration Ventilation Project. We have, and that's it. Any requests for removals? Counselor Jarrett.
I'd like to remove 23.310 in order to appropriate CPA funds for Smith Charities.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, that item has been removed. Any other requests for removals? Okay, hearing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda without item 23.310.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion made by Counselor Labarge and seconded by Counselor Jarrett. No discussion on the consent agenda. Laura, roll call, please.
Counselor Gore,
Yes.
Counselor Jarrett,
Yes.
Counselor Labarge,
Yes.
Counselor Maori,
Yes.
Counselor Moulton,
Yes.
Counselor Nash,
Yes.
Counselor Perry,
Yes.
Counselor Elkins,
Yes.
and Counselor Foster.
Yes.
Okay, the consent agenda has been approved without one item, and that, where'd you go? 23.310. Counselor Jarrett.
Thank you. Yes, I wanted to take this off to talk about the great tour that we took on Tuesday. I wanted to thank resident Jacqueline McCrainer for organizing. Unfortunately, Councilor Labarge was not well and was unable to make this tour, but Board President David Murphy has offered to give you a tour, personal tour, anytime once you're feeling up for it, Councilor Labarge. And so it's a wonderful old building. I really appreciated the new perspective of looking out the second floor at Main Street and like seeing downtown from just a perspective I'd never seen it before. The charity does great work. They've worked with the probate court to make allowances for changing times. Like, for example, they were able to add the city of East Hampton in as one of the beneficiary cities because so many folks at Smith Voc who attended Smith Voc, and you can, one of the benefits you can get is for folks who are in the trades, and so many folks from East Hampton were going there, so they were able to add that, and so I hope that they continue to modify the will as they're able to, the terms of the will that they're restricted by, to adapt to the changing times. I guess the building itself has a number of challenges. There's only one egress. There's no accessible entrance. But I do really want to encourage them in whatever way is possible to open it up for public use or use by other nonprofits, some way to really take advantage of this amazing historical building that is only partially used. The outdoor space as well could be used for made available for public use for certain events or at certain times. I think that would be excellent. It's this wonderful green space that we've all walked by, and it was great to be in it. And so, yeah, just, this is a great asset to the community. It's right in the heart of downtown, so I encourage their board to really look at how it could be more used other than the view from the street. And I would make a motion to approve the appropriation of CPA funds.
Second.
Okay, motion made by Counselor Jarrett and seconded by Counselor Moulton to approve, you think I'd have the number by now, 23.310. Any more discussion on this item? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Counselor Jarrett,
Yes.
Counselor Labarge,
Yes.
Counselor Maori,
Yes.
Counselor Moulton,
Yes.
Counselor Nash,
Yes.
Counselor Perry,
Yes.
Counselor Elkins,
Yes.
Counselor Foster,
Yes.
and Counselor Gore.
Yes.
Okay, item 23.310, in order to appropriate CPA funds for Smith Charities Phase 2 Rehabilitation Project has been approved in second reading. We're done with the financial orders. We are done with ordinances. It brings us down to zoning ordinances, and we have item 23.322, an ordinance to create a national flood insurance program overlay district. Laura, can you pull up the map?
Sure.
And this, so I'm going to talk when I see the map. Well, I'll start talking anyway. So, we have a lot of additional language here that has been supplied by Sarah LaValle, and this is the language that it has to do with this map here. This is the overlay district where people sometimes want to be able to get flood insurance. They may have a structure, they may have a home, they may have a barn, and that unless we add the language that is in item 23.322 to our zoning code, then we want people to be able to get flood insurance. This is boilerplate language directly from the feds, and it needs we need a public hearing by both the planning board and city council to approve this new language. Sarah LaValle was asking if she needed to be here. I told her, I thought I could explain that it was boilerplate and that we would refer it for the hearing, and she would go over it then, and that there's nothing spectacular about the language. It's really just enabling folks who own property in these flood zones to be able to buy flood insurance. Somewhere Sarah LaValle is thanking me for making that description to you. Maybe she's in bed. So, Councilor Jarrett.
I'll move to refer to the Planning Board and Legislative Matters.
Second.
Okay, motion made to refer this to the Planning Board and Legislative Matters by Councilor Jarrett, seconded by Councilor Moulton. Any further discussion?
Only to add that if possible, maybe we could have a joint hearing.
Yeah, Councilor Nash has actually been in touch, and Laura is talking with Planning Board to determine if that can happen.
Great.
Yeah, I want to add that Councilor Jarrett is that his concern, and I back him up on this, is that that currently the Planning Board is meeting in person, and that we as a council are meeting in hybrid or remote format, and that we need to figure out whether or not that accommodation can actually happen for the joint hearing. And so that's one of the things we're waiting on. So, and I agree with Councilor Jarrett on that. So, okay, so we have a motion on the floor to refer this. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Laura, roll call, please.
Councilor Labarge?
Yes.
Councilor Maori?
Yes.
Councilor Moulton?
Yes.
Councilor Nash?
Yes.
Councilor Perry?
Yes.
Councilor Elkins?
Yes.
Councilor Foster?
Yes.
Councilor Gore?
Yes.
And Councilor Jarrett?
Yes.
Okay, that has been referred to Legislative Matters and the Planning Board for public hearing and a recommendation from Legislative Matters. Next up, Select Committee to study barriers to serving on boards, their final report. We had the presentation last time, but it wasn't on the agenda for us to be able to really discuss it. So, thoughts on how to move forward with those recommendations? I have some. So I'll go first. I felt like the bulk of, there's two sides to the recommendations. There's the mayor's office, and then there's council. And that on council, that the body that most deals with appointments is city services. And my thought would be that we would refer this report to city services for them to work on implementing, the recommendations and report back to council on their progress. And I also expect that city services will be working with the mayor on, those a lot of what it had to do with the recommendations had to do with what the mayor, the interaction between the mayor's office and city services. And my thought is let's send it to city services and let them do some work. And that was the additional work I was thinking about earlier. So, Councilor Foster.
As the chair of city services, I knew what you were referring to, and we're planning to bring this up at our next meeting, so we will welcome the referral. I also see head nodding, so,
Does that need a formal referral, or?
No, we could do other things with the report as well. It's,
No. I just meant, do we need to vote on a referral, or?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Then I would move that we refer the report to city services.
Second.
Motion made by Councilor Elkin, seconded by Councilor Perry to refer the report to city services for implementation. Any discussion on that? I just want to say it was a great report. It was really terrific, and that that in terms of the discussion we just had around compensation, I mean, it's the same threads are embedded in. Some of those same threads are embedded in the select committee's report, and that I just see a lot of streams pointing in the same direction, and I really appreciate all of the work that the select committee did, the counselors here, and it's pretty cool. Things are all pulling in the same direction, so. Councilor Foster.
I'll be quick because it's late, but my theme of the night may be cynicism, and I know that very often people are concerned, like, oh, send it to a committee is like, the death knell for great ideas. And so, just to say that one thing I've really learned over the years and appreciate is that when residents get together and work on issues and issue reports, it does actually lead to action, and it doesn't lead to action yesterday, but it leads to action. And so city services will be taking the next steps that we can, toward helping to break down some of those barriers to service.
Okay. Any more discussion? Hearing none, we have this referral to city services. Laura, roll call, please.
Councilor Maori.
Yes.
Councilor Moulton.
Yes.
Councilor Nash.
Yes.
Councilor Perry.
Yes.
Councilor Elkins.
Yes.
Councilor Foster.
Yes.
Councilor Gore.
Yes.
Councilor Jarrett.
Yes.
And Councilor Labarge.
Yeah.
Okay. That's the last thing on the agenda. I will entertain a motion.
Move to adjourn.
A second.
I need a second.
Second.
Okay. Motion made by Councilor Elkins, seconded by Councilor Perry to adjourn. No discussion. Laura, roll call, please.
Councilor Moulton.
Yes.
Councilor Nash.
Yes.
Councilor Perry.
Yes.
Councilor Elkins.
Yes.
Councilor Foster.
Yes.
Councilor Gore.
Yes.
Councilor Jarrett.
Yes.
Councilor Labarge.
Yes.
And Councilor Maori.
Yes.
Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, all the committees.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you, everybody out in the audience.